Welcome, everybody, to Crystal Bearers, a Final Fantasy podcast, and this is episode 7. I'm Droogle.
I'm Rides Puff.
And I'm Easily 18.
And we are the Crystal Bearers, as are you, if you're watching right now, on twitch.tv/Droogle, or maybe you're going to listen to the podcast on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever it is. I also, of course, want to welcome our very special guest for this evening. We have Professor Noctis joining us. Welcome in, Professor.
Hey, what's up? Thank you for having me.
It's really great to have you here, and I want to let you have a moment here to talk all about what you do, because I think you are a perfect cast member for this evening with everything we're going to talk about. So please tell us what you do on Twitch and on YouTube.
Yeah, so I am a faculty member at the University of Alabama, where I teach a number of topics, including religious studies, literature, psychology, and philosophy through video games, particularly Final Fantasy XV, teaching Hebrew mythology and Christian messianic ideology and mythology with that as well. That was my dissertation, so I am a doctor of religion and video games, weirdly enough. And I started streaming and putting together YouTube videos as a result of that. And now that's what I do. I stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Central Time, where I talk about, I do lecture plays. You've heard of Let's Plays?
Mm-hmm.
They're like Let's Plays with lectures. And so we'll play the game, we'll pause at key moments and stories, and I'll give a miniature lecture like I would do in my classrooms, and then we continue with the game. That's usually on Twitch, and then over on YouTube, I do thesis videos or video essays, which are kind of curated content, about 15, 20 minutes. Most for this crowd probably would be interested in my Final Fantasy VII Remake lecture play and thesis videos.
I will say, in the
Rebirth
lead
stuff
up
coming soon.
to Rebirth, I watched a lot of your videos.
Yeah?
Because they're amazing, you guys. Go over to YouTube, and you just search Professor Noctis, same deal on YouTube. You'll find all the Rebirth hype videos, all the remake thesis videos leading up to the release of that. I was all aboard the hype train watching these videos, and they're just fantastic content and amazing educational information for anybody in the Final Fantasy space. And of course, your name being Professor Noctis, you do have a very strong love for 15, big defender of 15, because 15 does get a lot of hate still nowadays.
It does. And you know, like defender is a good word for it, because I had to defend my dissertation, which was on Final Fantasy 15, and now I defend it against Twitter. So it's just great.
Twitter's always going to be angry at something.
It is.
And I felt like with us doing Jeopardy tonight, I did have to get a little bit of Final Fantasy 15 in there for you, Noctis. So you can look forward to that.
Thank you.
It's a general Final Fantasy Jeopardy tonight, just to give you guys a heads up. It's going to cover a lot of different games. Most of you have played all the games I used, but I will admit, Shoop, I know, didn't play Final Fantasy VI. There's a little bit of Final Fantasy VI in there. Easily, I don't think you played Final Fantasy VI either. So
Not yet.
Noctis might have a little bit of a leg up. Noctis is definitely very experienced in the Final Fantasy space. I'm very curious to
Now
see how
you've
this
got me
Jeopardy
on 11. If you've played Final Fantasy 11, like I have very little experience with that.
You know
one.
what? I've talked about this on the show. I bought the network adapter and the hard drive on PS2 back in the day when
Me
11
too,
came
yeah.
out. It was the first time I wanted to try and get into MMOs, and it just didn't take for me. I just couldn't get into it. So I put some time into it, but I dropped it. I don't really remember it that well. I've certainly put more time into 14 than I have into 11. I'm on Shadowbringers of 14. And were you, by chance, I don't know if you can answer this. I hope I'm not asking something I shouldn't, but were you at the recent event for Dawn Trail?
I was not. No.
Okay.
No.
Because I did see there's a lot going around right now for Dawn Trail, I noticed.
Yeah, today the embargo was up on a lot of that content and stuff, so we're getting all the media previews and stuff. I haven't really done a lot of content or any content on Final Fantasy XIV, so I'm eager to experience Dawn Trail with everybody else.
Of course, yeah. There's a lot of hype there. Also, want to go over to our 2 core members here. Start with Rides Puff. How you doing, Shoop?
Hi, I'm doing great. I want to add on Noctis. I did see that you had gone through 7 Rebirth without using like the mini map.
Yes.
And I honestly loved that entire idea of a true immersive experience of like really putting yourself in the world. And like, let's face it, you don't walk around like, you know, downtown New York or something with a mini map in your head. Like, you just find your way around. And I thought that would have been a really cool experience, honestly.
I almost wish I did it that way, Noctis, because you experienced that in a sort of old school Final Fantasy way by doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing about open world that I do think is a detractor a lot of times. And I think 7 Rebirth actually did pretty well with this, and we'll talk about this a lot later. But when there's just check boxes everywhere and you feel like you're just checking off the list, it no longer has that sense of exploration. There's no longer that sense of awe that we all experienced back in the old days when you just ran into a random NPC. They told you something and it led you here and it led you there, and it was all organic, right? And
Yeah.
we've lost a little bit of that because of the convenience and the quality of life that they're trying to instill into these games. But it sort of removes an element too that I think a lot of people missed. And I think the Souls series and Breath of the Wild and a lot of these ones are sort of the course correction. And I think Rebirth also did that a little bit as well.
Yeah, let me tell you when I started doing this, because it's actually a really kind of interesting thing. It is more immersive and all that kind of stuff, but I never really thought about that until I played, of all things, Final Fantasy 15. I've put probably 1,200 plus hours in that,
Oh
but
my God.
you would expect it because I wrote a 180-page dissertation on it. So like that's like pretty normal, I guess, for that kind of whatever. But there's a specific chapter, chapter 5, where and you may remember this. It's where you are chasing down Rama or Ramu, and it's storming and there's lightning and all this kind
Yep.
of stuff. And so I'm playing through it, and the first time you do it, like you're just going to waypoints because you don't know where you're going. But I was like, I'm missing something here, because I had this part of my thesis was each of these divine gods correspond to some different ideology and religious or mythological traditions.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I discovered was if you look at the sky, lightning is striking where you go next. And I was like, I never realized this was a trial about, can Noctis provide in a time of storm and famine? And there's correspondence with like storm gods in the ancient Near East, right? And so I turned off the mini map, and you have to follow the lightning strikes for the purpose of survival and providing for the people. And I was like, this unlocked chapter 5 for me in a
That's cool.
pretty amazing way. And so after that, I was like, never again in an open world game am I going to use a mini map. It also
That's
was helpful
actually
in
really cool.
Gungaga.
Yes.
Mhm.
I see so many people we're going to talk about this later. You know what? We're going down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole. We got to
We
save
are.
this. We got to save this. We're going to be going into all this later on, but I'm happy. This is great already. This is great stuff. Easily, welcome in. How you doing, Easily?
Hi. Hi, not too bad. How are you? How are
Doing
we doing
awesome.
today?
How is streaming been? How has speedrunning been? You are speedrunning Final Fantasy 1 right now. And by that I mean that you are so fast in climbing the ranks. It's unbelievable.
That comes to a point of obsession, I'll be honest. There's about 80 hours in the last 2 weeks just on Final Fantasy 1, not including my own work and anything else I do. And you know what they say, practice makes perfect. I'll be honest, it's been helpful having somebody who knows the game so well teach me what to do.
Cap of the dorks.
Yeah. um his guide, who he's only just made, and I'm one of the early testers of it. I am now the fastest person to use his guide aside from himself.
Oh my goodness. Nice.
Um and I very nearly beat my ninth place time by 2 minutes, if not for Tiamat costing me 7 minutes. Um uh that still wouldn't have put me at the place higher though.
Okay.
There's about a three
I
minute gap
mean,
now.
all things considered, you're so early on in your journey as a Final Fantasy 1 speedrunner. To make the progress that you've made already is pretty amazing.
That's
So,
what's so wild to me is that Easley was like, I thought I would be where I'm at right now in at least a month's worth of running Final Fantasy 1, and it has taken him 16 days.
that's great.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it's
honestly
insane.
thought it would take me at least a month to get to top 15, let alone top 10.
Good for you,
That's
man.
impressive.
I want
Wow.
to jump back to Shoop real quick because I didn't get to hear what Shoop has been focusing on lately. And I do want to talk about it for a moment because it's your first experience of Final Fantasy on PC, utilizing the mod space. So I just want to let you talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sorry, I got caught up on the like immersing yourself into the non-map world. But yeah, I've been a console gamer my entire life. And we'll talk about this later of how we were introduced to Final Fantasy, but I was a PlayStation gal my whole life. And I've, outside of classic Doom, which I am a big fan of, and Drew can attest to this because I fall asleep to Doom building videos every night. Um, outside of that, I am a PC gamer noob.
Nude?
Noob. Oh my
We're
god.
off to a good start, you
Such
guys.
a great start. Noob with a B. D's and B's get mixed up into, with dyslexia all the time. What is it when you say it wrong? Anyway, so I've been playing Final Fantasy IX, which is my favorite game of all time, and I've been playing the Maguri mod and the Memoria mod as well, because it actually fixes a lot of things, especially with the audio in the Maguri mod. And if you don't know what the Maguri mod is, it's basically a mod that upscales all the pre-rendered backgrounds. The music is amazing. It's just everything about it is stunning. It's really beautiful. And I admit the first 2 streams that I did of Maguri, I was slightly off put by how smooth everything looked, because I was so used to this game that I've been playing for 20 years.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost looked too perfect. I didn't feel like I was playing the game that I've been playing for 20 years. It didn't
Yeah.
feel right.
Not to interrupt, but I
It's
think
such a
that has to do also with you have like the original character models with the Maguri mod.
I do, yeah.
So like if you play it on PlayStation, they redid the character models
For the
remaster on
remaster.
PlayStation. So I think if you took those remastered character models of PlayStation and put them in Maguri mod, it wouldn't feel quite as clashing. I think that's part of it, is you have this really nice pristine background now, like literally like 4K backgrounds,
Right.
but then the character models are still like old school PS1 models, so they look a little bit out of place in a nice clean background.
I got used to it after about 4 hours of playing it, but at first it was like a trick to my eyes. Like I wasn't used to just how nice everything was and how smooth everything was, and like the full motion videos being at like 60 FPS was mind blowing to me, and it was just it's very cool. It's very, very cool. And one of these days I'm gonna play a randomizer and really, really geek myself up with that.
It's one of the single best mods I've seen for an upscale of old school graphics.
Mhm.
To quite a nice degree, because it's not in your face with it either. It's very like well, look at when you were in Trino, the fact you can see what's in the background when you're exploring
Yeah.
up a Trino,
hmm
and you don't see that in the originals because it's too pixelated behind it.
I
So it's a
noticed that
really nice
myself.
change.
Shoop was at the moment where Limblom is attacked, and I'd never noticed it before, that when they're standing there looking, you can see Limblom up like in the distance on top of the mountain. Like I never even noticed that. I didn't realize it was even there
It's too blurry
in the original.
in the
So
original.
like this allowed me to actually see that in the upscaled 4K background. So it does add something, actually, crazily enough. And it's sort of crazy that the information was there. It's just like we didn't see it, but it was there. So it's very cool, and the amount of work that's gone into the Maguri mod, and of course I went through Echo S7 and all the other mods with 7. The modding space, I'm relatively new to it as well. It's really mind-blowing what has been accomplished with it within that space, and very curious to see, we're going to talk about later on 7 Rebirth, if it releases on PC, what the modding space is going to be like, what they're going to do with it. It's going to maybe breathe hopefully some new life into it that's not just about making certain assets bigger. Let's hope it's not just all about that.
Look, okay, I thought it was gonna be funny to go on like YouTube or something and look up like the nude mod. Cause like, let's face it, it's funny. Okay, it's funny. There's some guy
It's not
out
funny
there.
when you see it.
Yeah, it's some guy out there really enjoys this, and he took all the time to work on this. And I just thought it was gonna be funny seeing him bouncing around. I did not expect a nude cloud mod. And I was
Yep.
like, I was
Yep.
laughing so hard.
It's
in
only
the
fair.
living room, watching him in combat. I'm sorry. I was like, look, the modding scene is great and all, but this is just not my bread and butter. What is
Well,
this?
you've got to appeal to different audiences, right? So
Yeah.
He's swinging more than his Buster Sword. I'll say
yeah,
that.
he was. Let's go over to chat here. I want to welcome in everybody. We got Ratchet in here. We got Bebop, Catboard, Vash. Who else we got? We got Zephyroth. Of course, it's good to have you all here. Welcome in for this episode. And I hope you are a part of the conversation in chat tonight, because it's going to be a great one. Don't forget to utilize a lot of our Twitch channel point redemptions tonight. I see that 200 experience points have already been given to Shoop. She's already in the lead easily, and myself have 0 right now.
it's
0.
just a tale of common occurrence by now, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
such a regular thing
We
now.
whittled this down to it's because she's the girl. I know.
So biased. But we do also have one letter so far in the Moogle mailbox, and the Moogle mailbox is how we close off every episode of Crystal Bears. Feel free throughout the show to throw a letter into the Moogle mailbox, you guys. Of course, make it a question that is related to Final Fantasy, and if you can, try and make it something that we didn't already discuss on the show. Try and make it something that is going to bring in new conversation and something unique and fresh for the episode. I understand that's not always easy, so we might skip some questions if it comes down to it at the end of the show, but we'll do our best to get through as many of them as possible. Right now, you guys, we're just gonna jump right into it. I think we've had enough introduction here. Let's get into the first segment of the show. It of course is called the Level Update, where we go through some of the biggest news in the Final Fantasy space over the past few months, actually, because we've been absent for a little while, I will admit. We took some months off with Crystal Bears, but we're back now, and we want to get into some conversation here. We're going to start off talking about Final Fantasy XVI. We got some news from Square Enix themselves saying that it has expanded the series to new, younger players, which is, I think, a fantastic thing. They were speaking with Push Square as part of an upcoming interview. DLC director Takio Kuji, I'm not even going to try. I feel like I'm going to butcher it. Gave us some insight on the matter. Quote, in recent years, players of the Final Fantasy series, let's see here, have tended to skew towards a higher age range. However, this time there are survey results showing that more people in their teens and 20s played Final Fantasy XVI. I think this shows that to a certain extent, we've achieved one of our initial goals, to have players of all ages play the latest Final Fantasy game. This doesn't mean that all future Final Fantasy games will take a similar direction to 16, but I do think it means that we've been able to bring new players on board and open new possibilities. Let's just stop there. Let's go to Noctis first, our special guest. You played 16, of course. We all did. We all played 16. It's kind of funny because 16, to me, is one of the most mature entries in the entire franchise. It's the only mature rated mainline entry in the Final Fantasy series, yet it's the one bringing in new, younger players. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that the mature tones certainly help. I mean, think of the GTA franchise, right? I mean, the middle schoolers are going to play that game, even though they can't buy it themselves. And so I think that there is some intrigue to this storied franchise moving into that M-rated sphere. But I also think that the gameplay style is something that is a bit more reminiscent, right? I think that gameplay, along with the mature tones, are really going to make it more accessible. I think it makes you feel like you're not playing. This is again, hear me. I love Final Fantasy. I love all of the entries, but with the mature tones, this level of polish and voice acting, and this action combat, you don't feel like you are playing this very high fantasy sort of thing. It's very accessible and approachable to people that may not ordinarily be vibing with that genre.
Shoop, I know you're a big fan of Game of Thrones, and I know a lot of people have said they think it's a little bit of the Game of Thrones effect, that they were capitalizing on the success of it, bringing some of that vibe into the game. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think that on a surface level, it does feel or look a little bit more Game of Thrones, but there's certain elements of it that are more Final Fantasy than ever, in my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that the atmosphere of it was maybe trying to capitalize on that?
First, I want to correct that I was a big fan of Game of Thrones.
Sorry.
And then that happened. But I feel like they really wanted to they went a little different, right? We know a lot of like the older Final Fantasies, especially the first like 6, are all high fantasy. It's all magical world, magical things, magical creatures. And then with this, they almost took like a fantasy / historical approach to it, because let's face it, like almost everything politically that happens in Final Fantasy 16 has happened in some way in reality.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think to a degree, combining realism with fantasy can be very attractive to a broader audience. You take magic, you take summons, you take destiny, and combine it with things like war, and you have a really great story, especially when it comes to like, I mean, like Noctis was saying, the mature rating, they don't have to hold back from certain aspects of what they can or cannot include in the game. And let's face it, like 16th, 17th, and 18th century war, if you will, includes a lot of the things that they kind of put into Final Fantasy 16, and none of it is pretty.
Yeah. I think that's one of the strengths of Final Fantasy in general, especially I think once we hit 7 on especially the sort of fantasy based on reality, which was literally a tagline for Final Fantasy 15, right? And Final Fantasy 15 is actually one of the most successful entries in the entire franchise. It's one of the fastest selling. It's over 10 million now. Even 7 Remake and 7 Rebirth haven't matched it. And I do think there's an element of that. I think people like this fantasy in reality, merging the two together. 16 does a little bit too. It might be not modern reality as 15 does it, but it still is there. And going to you easily, I think also one of the things that we've heard a lot about 16 since its release is, for better and for worse, it has simplified the gameplay, right? It has made it more straightforward, maybe more accessible. You're controlling one party member. You're removing lots of status ailments and things like that, and really focusing it on more of an action. It's the most action-oriented Final Fantasy I think we've ever had, and especially in the mainline space. Do you think that is part of what's attracting the younger audience?
Absolutely, I do. If you look at some of the biggest selling games currently, medieval themed, combat is action based, none of it is turn based, and these are big sellers. Look at the Dark Souls franchise, in particular, Elden Ring, which for when it was made to when this was released, you got to take some kind of step and go. Maybe that was a huge influence. I believe that the younger audience likes the action based because if you look at the reviews on people saying turn based, action based, majority of the ones saying action based are typically younger,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yep.
ones saying turn based are typically the older generation of gamers. So you would factor in the fact that they see this game, which has been advertised as this incredibly fast, incredibly quick paced, high action combat style with incredible visuals. I mean, if I'm 16 and I'm looking to play a game, that to me stands out a lot more than, oh, I get to take my time and think about what I'm doing. So you have to factor that in as a huge factor. And whether or not that was the defining feature, who knows? But I feel like that was such a big influence. I think Elden Ring was one of the biggest influences to the way that they marketed 16 by quite a long margin.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I think we all can agree, no matter how you cut it, again, some of us love 16, some of us are a little bit lower on 16, but it's a good thing that the audience is being expanded, and it's absolutely a necessity for Final Fantasy to survive moving forward. And that's going to be a big discussion point tonight, is what is going on in the Final Fantasy space? What's going on with sales? Where is Square Enix potentially going wrong? How did 16 and 7 Rebirth potentially affect that? We need to talk about all that and what is best for this franchise moving forward to make sure that it stays healthy and reaches a large audience. Moving on to our next story, and this has a little bit to do with what's going on with Square Enix right now. They are shifting to a multi-platform strategy. I think it's a fantastic thing. Quote, for HD titles, the group will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs, especially in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. It will build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles. In addition, it will also devise a platform strategy for SD titles that includes not only iOS and Android, but also the possibility of PC launches. Furthermore, the group will strive to maximize the acquisition of new users when launching a title, and that of recurring users after starting management of game operations. So when they say group, that's literally like a rebranding internally. Like this is a big change. This is a very big change within Square Enix. A lot of people have complained in recent years about how they have been so focused on, it's not always PlayStation, but it's exclusivity all over the place, right? Whether it be Octopath Traveler or Triangle Strategy or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Remake or 16. It's all these games seem to start exclusive somewhere. They're never everywhere at once at launch. And I think what we're seeing as production budgets are ballooning, of course, it's not feasible anymore in the space, and it's actually becoming dangerous. And I think Square Enix is in one of the worst spots it's been in since like Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. And I don't mean that in a critical sense. I don't mean that in the quality of their games, because the quality of their games is actually, in my opinion, like probably best it's been since like the early aughts. Like this is the best we've seen Square Enix since, or Squaresoft, since those glory days of like 7 through 10. And like this is really amazing stuff. So it's really disappointing to see that they're not really receiving positive feedback, but it's their own fault in my opinion. What do you think, Noctis?
I work with a number of middle schoolers. Okay. Volunteer work, trying to prepare them for college and the rest of their lives and all that kind of stuff. And when they find out that I stream games, they of course hop in the channel and things like that. And they'll say, "What is this game you're playing? I've never heard of Final Fantasy."
Wow.
Square Enix has a branding problem with Final Fantasy where we all who know Final Fantasy from the glory days of way back when, we love this thing. But for whatever reason, we're not reaching this next generation of players. And I applaud Square Enix for trying a number of things, trying to get into the battle royale space with First Soldier. They were trying to middling, success, right? They're trying a number of different things, but the problem is when you are isolated to one console, especially the PlayStation 5. And with Rebirth, they didn't even release the PS4 version like all the Call of Duties and all that stuff, or like these other franchises will do. You're limiting the exposure and the reach. And even though they're getting kind of this back end deal to secure exclusivity, whatever money they're getting from those back end deals, they're still suffering from the market share and being in the mind space of the populace. I think that's the biggest issue that they're facing right now. And how do you break into that in other demos and genres and stuff?
That's a very good point because they're clearly getting a money bag, as a lot of people like to call
Yeah.
it, for their exclusivity on PlayStation. I don't know how much Sony paid them, but it wouldn't be surprising if it was all up front for all 3 games. You know, they might have
Sure.
back in 2015 when they secured exclusivity, this to Square Enix might have looked like, yeah, this is great. We're expecting Final Fantasy VII to blow up. It's our crown jewel. I don't think, 9 years later, this is what they expected.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about Rebirth sales later, but they're not that great, you guys. They're really not that great. As amazing as I think that game is, the sales are just not that great. So I think they did get their payday from Sony, but the more important thing, as you point out, is about hearts and minds. It's about mind share. It's about living on in the memories of younger fan bases and bringing them on and locking them in, right? Because one thing I heard recently, somebody made a really good point about how they were at like a convention for Genshin Impact, and I have like no connection to the Genshin Impact at all. I'm not interested at all, but they made a point to talk about how the people there, they were talking about Genshin Impact to this person who loved Final Fantasy and grew up with Final Fantasy. They saw the parallel. Like it was exactly the same. They were talking about the music and the characters and the world. They were talking about it in the exact same way that we talked about Final Fantasy growing up. So it's not like people aren't into that anymore. They still are. It's just Square Enix lost them somehow, and they need to get them back. So going to you, Shoop, obviously going multi-platform will help in sales, but like, what do you think? What do you think they need to do from like an actual game perspective? Like how have they lost people? Do they even need to? Are you okay with their trajectory? Maybe they need to lower budgets and just decide that they're not, a triple A, quadruple A studio anymore, and lower production budgets and focus more on old people like us that like the old way of things. What do you think?
I don't think it's about old people like us. First of all, the 30s are the new 20s and the 40s are the new 30s. All right. But here's my thing, and I think it was kind of great that Noctis, you brought up like working with middle schoolers. I have a 13-year-old cousin who learned how to read because of Final Fantasy IV, and I've talked about it on this before, that her and I would read together playing the game, and she knew what a chocobo was by the time she was 5 years old. I've got one tattooed on my shoulder, and but now that she's in middle school, she's going into 8th grade. I guarantee you, if she walked into her classroom and asked any of her little friends if they knew what Final Fantasy was, they would probably not have any idea. And then you've got Drew's kids. He's got 2, 8 and 5. They know what Final Fantasy is. Why? Because we've introduced it to them, and Final Fantasy is a household name here for us because we've had to spread that word. My issue as a consumer, as far as the Final Fantasy series goes and the future of Square Enix, I mean, at least from my community, you guys all saw, I had gotten a key from Square Enix to play 16 sponsored on stream. And I was delighted, but I didn't have a PS5. And so it was like, now what? I got very lucky. My birthday's actually next week. My birthday fell right before the 16 release, and my community, without my knowledge, had crowdfunded me a PS5. And I just sat there crying on stream, hugging this PS5, saying, I can play 16, I can play 16. But it shouldn't have to be like that. It shouldn't have to be like, these consoles are expensive. If you buy one console, you save up enough. Like, and I know we're going to get into it later in the question of the month, that people talk about like living on a budget nowadays and the cost of inflation and all that fun stuff nowadays. If you save up for a next gen console because you're really excited thinking all these games are only going to come to this one thing, and then they start releasing it only for some other thing, and then you got to save up for that console too. Like, we're talking thousands of dollars if you want to get yourself a PC, an Xbox, a PS4, a PS5, probably a PS6 by the time you save up for a PS5. It's just unrealistic when you could choose to play a game from some other company that is on every single platform and isn't gatekept based on acquisitions and money and this. Yeah, that's all it is. That's all it is this. And I think it's kind of a slap in the face to those of us in our 30s who grew up with these games, who got to play them on Nintendo and PlayStation and Xbox when they came. I remember when Final Fantasy X Remaster first came out, I first got it on an Xbox. I don't even own an Xbox. It was my ex's Xbox. But I was just so excited to play it on another platform. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's on Xbox. And it's just, I think it's all crap. I honestly, me personally, I realize this might be a weird opinion, but me personally, I feel like the whole exclusivity thing is crap. I haven't even played the Integrate DLC because when Remake came out, I played Remake on PS4. And then it was like, oh, we're only going to release the DLC on PS5. And I was like, well, I'm broke. So I guess, and I still haven't played that years later.
And because of their focus on exclusivity, they might have done irreparable damage because they're finally getting stuff on Xbox, right? They put Final Fantasy XIV on Xbox. If you look at the numbers, they're terrible. They're absolutely awful because they have trained Xbox audiences not to look for those types of games. And how it's going to take a long time for them to now shift that back into a focus on that platform. They've done potentially 10 years worth of damage by focusing on exclusivity for really like always. They've always done this. It's really been their MO for a really long time, and it worked in their favor for a while. Don't get me wrong. It did sort of define certain consoles and it worked well for them, but it just, things have changed and it really is hurting them in a big way now. I want to also go to chat here because I see B is kind of going off on a branch that I began here by saying, I just feel like graphics don't matter like they think. Pixel art is still a hit and you still tell great stories that way. Easily, if the next Final Fantasy XVII, is a clearly lower budget game, like let's say they really pull back, maybe they're doing more like static backgrounds, something more reminiscent of PS1 era, RPGs, but it still, has the flair. It's got great voice acting and music, and it's got a really cool battle system. Let's say they do that and they clearly lower the budget. Do you think that's going to like negatively affect the franchise?
So I slightly disagree to a point. So I do feel that graphics don't matter as much as they feel, but I do feel they do matter. Um, I very, very much liked the fact you brought Genshin into this, because Genshin is not realistic graphics, but is very crisp graphics,
Sure.
very clean graphics, and is very well made, especially for a free to play game. And I am not someone that believes that if they lower the budget dramatically, they're going to make sales. I think they have to find this middle balance where they don't have to blow everyone's mind with the graphics. They really don't. But they also need to factor in that if they do lower the graphics, everything has to be immaculate. You can't have a half-assed version of whatever they do.
That's what's so
I
funny
feel
is I
that
feel like some of the games that I've played that have lower quality graphics end up having immaculate stories.
yeah, the
Here's
stories they can focus on.
here's something I'll chime in and say. Super Mario RPG. First off, not even developed in-house by Nintendo. Outsourced to a third party, developed very, very low budget, I bet you, overall. It's a remake, very faithful to the original. It upgrades the graphics, of course, but that's not a big budget game. Not in the way 7 Remake and Rebirth are. It sold better than both of those. On one platform. Go ahead,
And
Easley. What do you want to say?
clean. Everything is
It
clean
is.
on that
It's very
game.
clean. So that's what I kind of want to go into here. For instance, like to me, like I remember when Final Fantasy IX came out. I remember how down on that game people were because it was cartoony and it didn't look, realistic and more modern like 7 and especially 8 started this trajectory towards.
Mm-hmm.
And people were really down on that. I remember Wind Waker after, Ocarina of Time. They're like, no, and remember that original tech demo that they showed for GameCube, for Zelda, and everything looked so realistic. And then they showed off Wind Waker. But to me, at those times, I loved how crisp and clean and the animation, the cartooniness. You're 100% right. You can achieve beautiful results. Genshin is a beautiful game. It's not really the artistic direction that I go for, but it's a beautiful game. You can't take that away from it. It's really got a very lively world. It's very colorful. And it doesn't cost as much as what they did with 7 Rebirth, which I will scream over and over again as we get into it. They did not need to go that hard. They went so hard with that game. I'm very grateful for it. I'm unbelievably grateful for it, but they did not need to go that hard. So I do think you're right. I think there's a middle ground that maybe they need to find. I don't know if it's something that they're going towards already or if we're going to see Remake Part 3 still be high budget. I don't know if we're going to see 17 be high budget, but something's got to give if they keep going down this path they're going down. So we're going to go into that a little bit more later on, but let's continue on.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
interject one
No,
more
yeah,
question
please
in there?
go ahead.
So do you guys know how much Paper Mario costs to buy?
How
Is
much?
it
What does? I'm
Paper Mario?
sorry.
Is it $40
Yeah, Paper Mario.
or 50?
It's
40,
probably,
yeah,
is it
40, I
40 or
believe.
50?
40.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
$39.99.
And how much did you pay for Rebirth
70.
as a 70.
Mhm.
And granted, Rebirth is phenomenal. But say if you're a new player to Final Fantasy franchise and your choices are because you say you know of Final Fantasy, you know of Super Mario, you look at both, they both look like they're made well. You see one costs 40 and one costs 70. Which one are you going to buy, especially if you're on a budget?
Right. Yeah.
40.
Cost
buy
of the
Paper
games
Mario.
are too high. Granted, in my eyes, Rebirth was 100% worth that.
Oh God, yeah.
But if I did not know what to expect, if I didn't know if I was a new person to Final Fantasy, I wouldn't pay 70. Not a chance. I
Hmm.
looked at the price of Baldur's Gate and I was like, I'm not sure. And that's a lot cheaper.
Justin in chat is saying that Paper Mario is $60 on Amazon on the Switch.
What about Super Mario RPG Remake, Justin? Could you look that one up too, just out of curiosity? Here's one last thing I'll say as well. They're building up hype on Dragon Quest 2D HD right now, and it seems like it's actually going to be potentially a trilogy, the original 3, which I think is really, really cool. I'm very curious to see what the sales on that are going to be like. First off, it's going to be on a lot of platforms. I think it's going to be on everything, honestly. I think it's going to especially be on the Switch, which is going to be a huge deal to have that on the Switch. I'm really curious to see what sales are going to be like on that game, because that, I think, could instruct sort of the way things need to go for them. I do think that, let's talk about Switch 2. I think it's going to be announced probably early next year. And I think it'll probably release relatively early next year. If that thing is strong enough and they've got some great AI upscaling technology in it and all that, they could probably put Remake on it. They could probably put Rebirth on it. They might even be able to put on 7 Remake Part 3. And that could
They can definitely put Remake.
That could be a
Crisis
game
Core's
changer.
already on it.
That could be a big
I
game
was
changer.
just about to say about Crisis Core.
Crisis Core especially. Yeah, 100% they could. They have it on there already,
that's
right?
already
Switch is
on the
there.
first one, yeah.
They already have that on there. So they've started that path, and I think anybody who knows the sales space, Japan is so Switch heavy right now. They're all in the mobile space, and as a result of that, Final Fantasy just doesn't do well over there right now because it is exclusive to PlayStation.
I kind of want to address what was also said in chat by Smithy.
Okay, yeah, let me just finish my thought real quick.
Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
just wanted to say that Final Fantasy used to sell 2 million copies alone in Japan. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth so far probably isn't that much above 2 million worldwide. And Final Fantasy in Japan alone used to sell 2 million. So it's a game changer. If they can get that space back, that's also very important. But go ahead, Shoop.
Well, Smith kind of also, this kind of correlates, saying that Final Fantasy as a franchise is about going forward with tech and specs. You can mess with the art and effects all you want, but I don't think you can go full retro in the main line at this point. I feel like they could make a game specifically focused towards retro, but it would have to be completely separate. Like, I think it would have to be a spinoff.
I agree.
It wouldn't have to, it couldn't be Final Fantasy 17, you know?
There is an expectation for sure.
Yeah, there is. But I don't think that it's going to be a part of a mainline series. I think it's going to be a spinoff.
No,
like,
I'm
it could be
agreeing with
Final
you, yeah.
Fantasy Retro or something.
Yeah, I'm saying there's an expectation to a certain degree. I don't think you can go back retro style with Final Fantasy anymore. I think you could find a middle ground, as Easley was talking about, but you can't make a pixel art game in the mainline Final Fantasy space and not expect to upset a lot of people. I think. Do you agree with that, Noctis?
One more.
I do. I think that it's not just an expectation from fans and players, but it's an expectation from the devs themselves. They've always prided themselves, especially since Seven, on being the cutting edge, the standard maker, as far as graphics, technology, and immersion are concerned. And with the Super Nintendo, I mean, one of the big things that I remember from the NES and the SNES is that those limitations created opportunities for creativity, right? And so that's why we get these incredible soundtracks to these games, and the ways that they were able to manipulate the technology. And I think that some of the just like the world is your oyster sort of thing that we've got now with graphics and tech has stifled some of the creativity in some of these later entries. And I'm maybe the biggest defender of on the planet for Final Fantasy 15, but that I think is one of the things that held it back a little bit. And so part of me is like I'm right there with Smith. I do think that they need to think more simply, though, and that doesn't necessarily mean retro graphics, right? And we'll get into this with Rebirth and with 16 in our later conversation, I'm sure. But I think that when you shoot the moon every time, I think
You're not always
smaller
gonna
and be
hit the
surprised.
moon.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you're just not. And they've got to figure out what they are. Yikes.
Yeah, I will say
It's hard for me to say.
It's admirable though, right? Like that's the thing is I think
Right.
we all have to give them some credit for shooting for the moon because they
Oh,
are.
totally.
They clearly are. And there's no way you can play Rebirth and not realize that there is nothing about that that's a cash grab. There's nothing about that that is phoned in. Like there's so much passion and creativity in that game that every person involved with that was shooting for the moon. And it depresses me. In all honesty, it really does depress me that it's not getting the admiration that I think it deserves. I know I'm a fanboy. I'm obviously a fanboy. 7 OG is my favorite game of all time, and now they're continuing that with Remake and Rebirth. But it's hard not to play that game and feel all the love that went into it. And I want them to get that respect. I really want them to get that respect. So it's I hope that there's things, and we're going to talk about this later on. I hope that there's a way to get life and legs out of 7 Rebirth. I really think there are ways to get legs out of that game, and I think that they're going to capitalize on it, and we can brainstorm that later on. I am going to move on. I hate to kind of keep us moving here, but we're down the rabbit hole. We're having an amazing conversation, but I want to make sure we get through everything tonight. Real quickly, this continues on what we were just saying, but Square Enix actually took a $140 million hit in content abandonment losses. And just to summarize this quickly, what it means is they're canceling projects is what's happening. So that is, again, kind of showing what's going on here is that internally they are in such a dire state that they potentially could have canceled Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. I don't know. We can't know for sure. we're going to talk more about 9 Remake later. It sounds like that isn't on the chopping block, fortunately, but we don't know. What did they shut down production on? How far along was it? I put a poll in chat for you guys. Which of these do you think is the more likely canceled, 9 Remake or Tactics Remaster? Or maybe neither. But that is a little bit of a depressing point there. That's what goes along with these internal changes, is they've got to find a way to restructure and figure out a way to make money. It's just the way of it.
I
way of
hope they
business,
don't
right?
touch either of them. If either of them exists, I do not want them to be messed with.
I don't think either one is in danger.
I agree with you.
I don't
Noctis,
either.
agree.
I don't either personally.
Well, and it
go ahead.
goes back to the expansion of their brand, right? So Final Fantasy VII Remake, that style of remake may not have been everybody's cup of tea. And if you're on Twitter, you know it's not. But with a truer 9 remake and then a Tactics remaster, especially in light of Baldur's Gate, I think that this is a way of building the Final Fantasy brand out to people that may not be aware of it.
I think I know
agree.
we talked about this on we did a spoiler cast last fall of Final Fantasy 16. Just so y'all know, we're not doing any spoilers about Rebirth or 16 tonight, because we know a lot of people still have not played them. But we talked about turn-based combat during that stream, and we spoke a lot about how, well, you know, blah blah blah, nowadays like action combat is a new cool thing, and it's like, well, Baldur's Gate proved to everybody that turn-based is still very much in.
Oh God, yeah.
It just has to be marketed properly. Like, there's still
Yep.
several people out there who love it. It's not that it's not loved anymore.
It's a different type of turn-based, but it still shows
Oh
that there's
gosh,
an audience.
it's a different type of turn-based. I'm playing
It
Baldur's Gate
is,
3 for the
yeah.
first time right now, and
Yeah.
I am struggling. I like turn-based. This is not my turn-based.
It's classic RPG turn-based, like truly classic.
It is D&D, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, where's my menus?
Honestly, it's kind of going back to like Final Fantasy 1 D&D style turn-based to a certain extent, but in the realm of like every little thing you do, like literally everything you do in that game is a
It's
turn
an action.
and an action,
an
yeah,
action.
and a dice roll, and yeah, it's another, it's like it's turn-based on roids.
I don't know if Drew has ever played D&D. I have. I enjoy it. I don't know. I've never played Baldur's Gate though, so
Yeah.
I've also just started Baldur's Gate, and I actually love the D&D style of it.
Really?
I think it's very refreshing to have a way to play D&D essentially without being forced into a story that I have to sit with a group every week, and someone has to plan it and organize it and run it, and
Yeah.
it's D&D made accessible.
Yeah. No, I mean,
If you
obviously it
wanna
did very well.
if you want to see something ridiculous, I am live vlogging. I'm vlogging my Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough over on YouTube, and like I like the game, okay, but it comes across as like I'm incompetent, and I am right because I'm like, I like turn-based games. This has really messed me up.
I love it. You know, sometimes the struggle is the best part though for viewers. They love watching us struggle. So I'm sure people are loving it. But continue on real quick here. There was actually some conversation going around when all the news of Rebirth sales and the $140 million of content, what do they call it, abandonment losses? People were talking about, God, like, what if they cancel a remake part 3? And I was like, they're not gonna cancel
Zero
remake
chance.
part 3. Are you
No.
kidding me? Do you understand like the mutiny internally, but also the chaos that would ensue from their fan base? But just to clarify, they've literally said 7 remake part 3 is already well underway. Like literally, we're talking about like a year and a half underway. Like they've been working on remake part 3 while working on Rebirth. Quote, years ago during the planning phase, I knew the kind of commitment a project like this would require. This is coming from, I think, in Nomura, actually. Part of me didn't want to do it. I could already see how much this was going to be. And once we got started, there was no throwing in the towel halfway through. You can't leave things on a cliffhanger. You're stuck now. It's a massive undertaking. From the moment production started, I wanted it to end. And at least now we're finally past the midway point. Personally, I want to be done with this absolute marathon of projects. Najima and I are hard at work on it. We're off to the races already. The developer then asked Uematsu if he's up for the challenge of working on part 3 and how he plans to surpass the songs he's already composed for Remake and Rebirth, to which the composer said, for starters, I'm going to take a vacation. Which he deserves.
Yeah,
Very well deserved vacation.
good.
But it's good to know that it's well underway, and also really good to know, to add a little point to this, one of the reasons Rebirth had such an amazing development cycle and a quick turnaround is they kept over 80% of the production team from remake to Rebirth.
Mhm.
And the same has happened once again from Rebirth to part 3. They have kept almost everybody that worked on remake and Rebirth on board for this project. That is great news. I don't think, personally, I know that they aren't having the best sales with Rebirth. I don't see them compromising part 3. Not in a way that we will ever know or see.
No.
They might do something. Maybe it has less mini games, but we're never going to be able to look at it and be like, this is where they cut things. This is where they cut things. I don't think we're ever going to have a chance of that kind of remake part 3. But yeah, maybe they find a couple, loopholes or some ways to cut some costs, and things like that. That'd be great. Go ahead and do it. But I don't think we need to worry about them compromising.
Could you
part 3.
imagine if we had Fellowship and the Two Towers, and then everybody was like, sorry, you guys, you just get no Return of the King? Like, it just wouldn't make any sense. Like, you can't take away our grand finale like that. There's no way they would ever do that.
Speaking of grand finale, when do you guys think it will release? How far away are we from part 3?
I'm on the fence, personally, between late 2027 and 2028. Because I know, like, everything is pretty much made at this point, as far as where we are with remake and Rebirth. As far as the world building goes, everything's already made, so it's not going to take, I don't think, as long between remake and Rebirth as it would take for Rebirth and we don't know. But it's,
I want them to take as much time as they need, of course.
That's the other thing I was going to say, though, is that I want them to take their time. I don't want them to feel like they have to rush it out just because they have everything so well made already for the most part. Like, flesh it out. I don't mind if they flesh it out. I know a lot of people were like, oh, there's so much in Rebirth. There's too much in Rebirth. Like, well, your too much is almost 70% optional. So I don't mind if they add a bunch of optional content.
We're gonna have to talk about that later for sure. I hate those comments a lot.
I
see
have
in chat,
a lot around that.
Smith says part 3, February 7th, 2027. And I think one of the reasons they might be choosing that date, and I agree, 2027, 30-year anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. It would make sense to try and capitalize on that, right, Noctis?
Well, the original in Japan was released on January 31st, 1997. And so I could see them hitting that. I think it'll be early 2027.
There were rumors of early 27. That was the initial rumors that I was hearing anyway.
Yeah.
So I would lean towards them as well.
Yeah, we have a long time to wait, but I think we all can agree they should just take as much time as they need to make sure they finish off this trilogy the right way, because they're off to an amazing start. I mean, Rebirth is one of the highest reviewed games of the year, and it's the first time I actually could see a mainline Final Fantasy game winning like the big game of the year title. Like, I think we're at a chance of seeing that happen for the first time in a very, very long time. Continuing on, we got one more topic here in the level update. There are some new details on Final Fantasy IX Remake that were leaked. Take these with a grain of salt.
Excuse me while I roll my eyes.
Always take them with a grain of salt. I will say the person that leaked them has been somewhat reliable. They've gotten some stuff right. Mostly they've gotten stuff right. But the things they said here kind of seem a little bit like Captain Obvious to me, to the point where it's like, okay, maybe they're just like putting things out there that are probably going to be true just to give themselves some more reputation and clout. But let's talk about it just in case. According to them, this is all tweeted out. The Final Fantasy IX Remake is still in development. It is a title that was not canceled in the restructure of Square Enix during the fiscal year. According to conversations, the title was originally outsourced to another developer, but Square Enix was not satisfied and development shifted. That might feel a little deja vu to some of you, because that is exactly what happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake. They outsourced that game for a couple years, I believe, to the Dot Hack studio, if I remember right. I think CyberConnect. And they were not satisfied with how things were going, and they scrapped a lot of their work and brought in internal, and they lost a couple years of development probably in that process. I don't think that's what happened here. If it did happen, it's probably very early on that they decided that, but Could be true. Continuing on, development of this title is now very far along, but I do not have any firm information on the scope of this title or a firm release period right now. The title could release before the end of this fiscal year, which would be, March 31st or so, but I am not certain right now. There are plans for new information on some Square Enix titles at the Xbox Showcase, which is next week, by the way. I don't know if this title will be at the showcase, so it is good to keep expectations low right now. And this is a title is currently planned for release on multiple platforms. Awesome news. I hope that's true. During a period of time, I think this title was in development for current Switch hardware. I'm not certain if it is still in development for Switch or if this title will still be released on Switch. I could not verify. I really hope that it is. I think that would be very good for the franchise to release on the Switch. What do you guys think? Team fake, team real? Do you believe any of it? Noctis, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I believe it. Like you said, it seems very obvious,
Yeah.
right? And so if it is in development, all of this tracks. And I think that it would be smart to make sure that it is on as many consoles as possible. A Switch version, a Switch 2 version in the making, whatever it is. Like put it on phones. I mean, put it on everything because you've got to
Right.
get that
Put it on
mind
phones.
share.
Yeah. iPhone's more powerful than a lot of stuff nowadays, it
Yeah, I
seems like.
know,
And
right?
pads too. What do you think, Easily? Believe it? Also, sorry for
I
this.
want to.
I opened this.
I want to believe it, but how long have we been hearing? Oh, they're potentially doing remake, they're potentially doing remake. It's been so long. Honestly, I want to keep my expectations so low
Mhm.
about a remake of 9 because I have quite possibly played 9 more than damn near anyone else in the last 2 years. And I don't wish to sit here and go, that game's getting a remake. I
Yeah.
want to
Mhm.
go, right, Square, give me an answer, then I will get excited.
One part of the leak that strangely gets me hyped, because to me it would imply the respect that they are giving this game, is that they would bring an internal, that they were looking at the
Mhm.
outsourced quality and like, nah, this is not up to our standards, this is not up to the standards that people expect for Final Fantasy IX. So like, going to shoot who Final Fantasy IX is literally your favorite game of all time. Square Enix needs to treat this with the respect that it deserves, right?
Yeah, I'm very like team no comment when it comes to rumors and leaks. Like I take a lot of things with a grain of salt because things are constantly speculated on the internet and then end up being abhorrently wrong.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of things, some end up being abhorrently right. And I think it's disrespectful to the developers to like constantly put out all this information. And it's like, damn, like let them have a chance to have their moment of the hard work that they
Mhm.
put in to announce it properly. So like I have a rule on my own personal Discord and my channel of like no leaks and no rumors. Like if you have an official announcement by the developers, by all means share it. But I avoid this stuff. I would be very fine with a 9 remake. I would be very fine with it not being nearly as upscaled as 7 was and it being a much more smaller, far less intricate type of game, because 9 is meant to be simple and it is meant to have this cartoony, like we see in the Memoria mod here, this cartoony levity to go along with such a heavy story.
Yeah.
And I don't want anything extravagant if they do a 9 remake personally. I'd be very fine with it looking just like the. Did I say Memoria mod? I'm sorry, the
Memoria
Memoria
Project.
Project. I've been playing the Memoria mod. So
Honestly, if it looked like this, at least in its ambition, then I'd honestly be surprised and impressed. I don't think it's going to be to this degree, and
I
I do
cried
sort
over
of,
this.
I do sort of wonder if
Oh, that's
this
gorgeous.
this
Yeah.
Memoria project impacted them in any way in their ambitions, because it's been rumored that it's been delayed many times because they did want to sort of bring it up to a higher quality. But this, unfortunately, going to what you were saying about leaks and rumors, this is like one of the worst kept secrets in the industry and has been for years now, because this was a part of the NVIDIA GeForce leak that was like 3 years ago at this point. Like this thing has been, we've been waiting years for this based on that leak. And it does seem like all that smoke is leading to fire.
I think outside of rumors and leaks, I think there have been little hints within Square Enix that possibly points to a 9 remake being real. The whole with Dawn Trail coming out for 14. They've got, I mean, we were at PAX East and they had Final Fantasy IX stuff galore. I didn't go to the 14 panel that day. Drew did. There was lots of 9 stuff.
I think even Ever Crisis had like some 9 stuff
They
recently,
have
right?
they have a new location called
Yeah,
Solution
they did.
9. What is Solution 9? One
Yeah.
of Zidane's trances.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, but
like,
they had the Garnet like Aerith dress
Mhm.
in Ever Crisis. They had the Black Mage battles too, I think. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's been
Mhm.
a lot. There's been a lot of stuff recently.
there's a lot of
I
hints.
I do very much believe I don't think it'll be as cartoony as you'd like. I think it'll be very similar to Final Fantasy XIV's graphics because they already
Mm.
have races that are not humanoid
Mhm.
on 14. And so it's very easy for them to transpose that same quality of NPC and quality of race into a realistic game. And I think that's the style they will go off.
I
Yeah.
would love to see the hippo people in high def. That's all I'm saying.
Paul. Going before we move
Hopefully
on to our
not
next segment,
nightmares.
just acknowledge chat here real quick. We got a lot of new names I'm seeing in here. We got Piggy Prime, Lunchbox, Subtext says 9 remake is definitely real. I have to agree. It's definitely real. But I'm seeing a lot of new names in here, so that's amazing. Welcome in everybody. Welcome to Crystal Bears. We're joined by our very special guest, Professor Noctis, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some of these new names are coming from Noctis's community, which is really cool to see. Welcome in. Thank you so much for being here with us. Yeah, hearts, everybody. Of course, we're joined by Risey, Shoepuff, and Easily. And I just want to say real quick before we move on, follow all of these amazing content creators on their platforms, Twitch and YouTube, especially for Professor Noctis, Easily 18, Risey, Shoepuff, Prof Noctis, all amazing Final Fantasy content creators. Goddess Midgar, it's very good to meet you. Welcome
I
in.
already like this person already. The goddess Midgar with Aerith emotes. I like it.
With the chair.
With the
Cherith.
Cherith. Yeah.
Cherith. Let's go.
Cherith.
Cherith.
Also just want to let you guys know we are about to have ads forced upon our community, and I hate that. I apologize to those that are about to get hit by ads. We are going to continue on with the conversation and move on to our next segment in the show. It is called the equation of the month. Of course, the equation of the month. You guys can utilize this on our Discord. It's at discord.gg/Droogle. It's technically my Discord, but if you do join the Discord from the very moment you join, you'll be asked questions like, do you care about Droogle or do you just care about Crystal Bears? And if you don't care about Droogle, it'll just literally isolate the channels to be nothing but the Crystal Bears channels. So feel free to do that if you would like. That's totally cool with me. I just want to get more people in this Crystal Bears community answering the question of the month. And this month's question relates to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales, as we were talking about earlier. They are reportedly way under Square Enix's expectations, especially considering the very successful release of Final Fantasy VII Remake. What contributed to Rebirth's underwhelming sales? Maybe our community can at least provide anecdotal evidence. If you skipped Rebirth, why? Did you not have a PlayStation 5? Are you waiting for the PC release? Are you waiting for the full trilogy? Did you not like Remake? And of course, we're curious for those that didn't skip Rebirth, why they think that it might not have performed as well as Square Enix wanted internally. I'm going to start off with our biggest response that came in from Taserface, as I like to call him, who said, I absolutely adore Rebirth. Easily the best game of the year and a serious high point for the franchise. I do feel like the console install base could be a contributing factor to there being less sales. At the time Remake released, the PlayStation 4 had been around for several years and had sold around the 100 million mark. The PS5 has now sold around 59 million, which is still a remarkable amount, but statistically speaking, not every Remake player will have a PS5 as of yet. It could also be that Remake didn't work out how some OG fans wanted, thus they have no interest in the sequels. There has been a lot of discourse about the Remake trilogy changing, adding story elements, and not being turn-based. The last big factor, in my opinion, is the inevitable PC port. I've seen a fair few people say that they'd rather wait for the PC port than shell out for a new console for just one game. And I know several fans of Remake who bought it again on PC who'd rather play Rebirth on PC too. Remake released during a global lockdown, meaning many people were looking for entertainment at home and had money spare from not being able to go out, not going on holiday, etc. Meanwhile, Rebirth has been released within a cost of living crisis. Many people will be prioritizing bills, food, etc. And some of us who do have disposable income will be potentially prioritizing which games to get. Rebirth may just not be a big priority for some fans right now. Amazing response. Really kind of touched on almost everything in my opinion, and I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people really are not looking at the big picture on this. It's 100% true. 7 Remake sold very, very well, but that it was really perfect timing. I hate to say that because it's a terrible thing. We were all in lockdown due to COVID, but we saw what happened. Subscriptions were skyrocketing. Game sales were skyrocketing. People were at home. They were stuck at home. They were playing games. And 7 Remake, the first in a trilogy series that was, built up for, God, like 20 years almost, finally released during that. So it makes sense that it would take advantage of that 100 million PS4 install base and sell very well. I don't think that really takes away, because something we'll talk about later on is that Rebirth is not selling as well as 16, which did release on PS5, did release exclusively, and released actually to a lower install base when it came out than 7 Rebirth. So for that reason, let's continue on with another response here. Go ahead, Shoop.
I'm going to read Draco's response. Based on the language of the pre-release interviews, it sounded like Rebirth would hit PC faster than, say, 16. Considering the price point of the PS5 and lack of exclusives, I can't blame anyone who would want to hold out for the PC port, especially those who are fond of the modding scene. The modders had a field day with Remake. I think we always knew that Rebirth wouldn't sell as well as Remake because that's just a general trend in games. Sequels generally sell less than their predecessors, even when they're fantastic in their own rights, as evidenced recently by God of War Ragnarok, Tears of the Kingdom, Alan Wake 2. And I'm sure there's a small subset of people who don't like the changes. Without getting into spoilers, Remake definitely means something in the gaming industry. And when Remake wasn't that, some people were a bit turned off. But I do believe that to be a smaller group.
For sure.
I agree with that. And kind of what Drew was saying about why 16 sold more. I personally feel like at the end of the day, when you say 16, that means boom, mainline series installment.
Exactly. It does. It really
And
does.
and I said earlier about Lord of the Rings, everybody loves the Fellowship. The Two Towers kind of gets muddled in the middle. Everybody loves Return of the King. Sequels are not going to sell as well in a trilogy compared to the like the what do you call it, like the predisposition type, which would be the Fellowship, and then the climax and finale, which would have been Return of the King.
Yeah, and this is a very consistent thing. I mean, there's very few, let's just go to trilogies.
This is
There's
how
very
trilogies
few
work.
trilogies where the sequel sells more at the very start. It might have great legs, but at the very start, the sequel very rarely sells as well as the first game, especially if we're talking about a transition to a next generation. A few examples would be like The Witcher 3 sold incredibly well, but Witcher 3 was also very separated. I think a lot of people played Witcher 3 and never even played 1 and 2.
I never played 1 and
The
2.
the one series I will say like grew with each entry and did amazingly well. Mass Effect. Mass Effect is an example of a series that just continued to grow with each game. It's hard to pull that off. It doesn't often happen. A lot of people go to like The Last of Us or God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok didn't sell as well as God of War 2018. Last of Us Part 2 did not sell as well as The Last of Us Part 1. You might think that it did, but it actually did not. And actually to a pretty large degree as well. Like The Last of Us Part 1 sold a lot better than The Last of Us Part 2. It's just the way it goes, because you can't expect the entire install base, game base, whatever you want to call it, of the first game to carry over. So you're immediately hitting a ceiling. From the moment you release that game, there's a ceiling that you're going to be hitting against, and you've got to break through that somehow. Easily. Next response, please.
This one is from Platypus. I have Rebirth. I haven't played it yet. Maybe waiting for the third one because I decided to replay Remake first before starting Rebirth, only to made it halfway. Also bought on the first day for Remake, so I don't really have the integrated DLC, which annoys me slightly. I won't be able to really ever finish the game. I prefer on disc, but I can't justify the PS5 integrated version just for the DLC.
Mhm.
So
Um,
this brings another discussion point up that I want you to talk about easily. I'm curious if you've experienced this, in your community, people having this conversation. I remember when it was announced that it would be 3 parts, or at least multi-part. I think originally it was announced as multi-part, and then eventually they clarified it as 3-part. People were very upset about that when it first happened. Everybody's like, "How dare they do this? How dare they cash grab us and try and draw as much blood from the stone as possible in this way? That this is an egregious offense to us all." And a lot of people decided. I remember at that point they're like, "I'm not playing this. I will not play it until all 3 games are released." Have you experienced that narrative?
I don't know the exact reason, but Shoop mentioned Caps of the Dorks earlier. He is not playing them until all 3 are out.
There you go.
Wow.
I haven't pushed him as to why, um, because it's his choice to do. But I will say this: I am a huge lover of Seven. The sheer euphoria I felt when I first saw that Remake was getting released Not Rebirth. I didn't feel the same way, which is bizarre because I prefer Rebirth at the moment. But when I first saw that trailer for Remake, the sheer excitement I had that I didn't get for 16 or Rebirth, just didn't get it.
Hmm.
And maybe that's the nostalgia factor. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But the sheer anger I felt when I heard that it was potentially up to 8 parts was one of the rumors. I
Hmm.
heard that it was gonna be in multiple games, and
These
then
were
when
dark
they said, "Oh,
times.
it's 3 games." Great, fantastic. "Oh, yeah, but you've now got a DLC that you can't get on your PS4." I was so angry to the point where I still have not played that DLC, and I own it.
It's
Me,
so good. It's
me
so
too.
good. It's
I
amazing
haven't played
Yeah.
DLC.
it either because I played Remake
Well,
on PS4 when it first came out, and then
Mhm.
I
oh
didn't have a
man,
PS5 until last June.
Well, easily,
Well,
especially, you need to correct that because that DLC is
yeah,
actually awesome.
it's
Well, I
so
planned
good.
on doing it before Rebirth, but then I can't remember what reason why. I think I was practicing 10 or something. I spent so long doing that that I just pushed back everything else. And then next thing I knew, Rebirth was out. And I will say that I regret not playing it first.
Hmm.
I will
Not
admit
badly though.
when they first announced that it was gonna be multiple parts, even me, I was like, okay, like I want to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but why? And when they said the first part was gonna be Midgar only, I was especially like, that's like 6 or 7 hours in the original.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
what the hell are they gonna do? But once they started showing the game, and when you if you have like sort of even a base understanding of game development and how it has progressed over the years. There was like a
Mhm.
period of time, a lot of people will remember this because it was hilarious around Final Fantasy 13 especially, where Square Enix said making HD towns is too hard. We can't do it. Like they had to grow really with the landscape of gaming.
Hmm.
Mm.
And it's a very big difference to have Final Fantasy VII where the train graveyard is literally two screens, two pre-rendered screens. That's all it is. You run through it in 10 minutes. Like, would we have been satisfied with that in Remake? Going through the train graveyard in less than 10 minutes? Two screens? Like, no, I don't think we would have been. Like, and I know a lot of people get on the train graveyard as being like this pacing problem. I actually think it's really great. I love the train graveyard. And I think you do as well. I actually think I saw a video from Noctis that was saying why the train graveyard is actually really great.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a great moment in the game, and I think it's an example, in my opinion. Maybe they didn't need to make it as long as they did, but it's an example of like this is the way things have progressed. You
Hmm.
can't take two pre-rendered screens from Final Fantasy VII, make a triple A high budget remake, and not expect that to balloon up in size and really require a lot more from the team. That's the entire game. Noctis, go ahead. I can see you want to
Yeah,
have words on
I
this.
think for me, and I experienced this playing Rebirth especially, and in talking to some other creators, subtext in the chat, he and I have talked about this a good deal. This is one game across 3 parts, and once that final installment comes out, I think that, number 1, all of these small portions, like the train graveyard, Hojo's lab, I hope, in chapter 17 of Remake, all of these are going to feel properly in their they'll be in their proper place in the grand scope
Yep.
of things. Also, small little scenes like Kate Sith during the plate fall of remake. That's going to be a little bit more grounded when you've got this entire trilogy that you can play one after another.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like I think Shoop, you said. Liken it to the Lord of the Rings. These are sequential parts of
Mhm.
one whole story. And
Hmm.
right now we're experiencing the excitement for the next game for a lot of us, but also frustration of lack of resolution. We know it's going to be 3 more years. And so I empathize with the people that are like, I'm going to wait until part 3 comes out and then get the deluxe package for, $100 or whatever it is,
Yeah.
so that I can
Yeah.
play. And think about it. I mean, think we will get a 300-hour Final Fantasy VII in its entirety, as it should be played, right? And
Right.
that will be the game, in my opinion, to end all games, because it's like it will have everything: the linear
Mm.
portions, the open world portions, and a narrative that goes through all three. I think it'll be amazing once we get to that
For
point.
me personally, like that's too much all at once. Like 300, like I know, for
Sure.
instance, like Persona 5 Royal, I put 220 hours into. That was too much
Yeah.
for me. That was too much. I put 170 hours in the Rebirth, and I will admit that was not too much for me. I loved
Yeah.
every minute of it. But I think 300 hours all at once would be much. I do understand that a lot of people, when they announced it as multiple parts, didn't really understand like what the scale, what they were going for, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody expected them to go so hard on Rebirth, because they really didn't have to.
Well,
They
I
went
want to go ahead. Sorry.
they didn't have to go as hard as they did. I started lost my train of thought now, but go ahead, Sheep. What were you gonna say?
I just want to say that I'm kind of an example of the patient gamer. Like
Mm.
I have not actually streamed a 7 installment on my stream yet. I want to. I keep wanting to, but I feel like we've been
Mm.
dropped so many Final Fantasy things recently. Like the Pixel remasters on console, so I was going through all those, and then Final Fantasy 16, and then I did that, and then I also got a code for Rebirth, and I still haven't played it yet because I want to really line things up right. Like I want to play
Mhm.
OG7 on stream first, and then I want to play Crisis Core, and then I want to play Remake, and then I want to play Rebirth. I don't want to just immediately play Rebirth because oh, it's out now.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know, I mean, obviously, I experienced the entire game moderating for Drew, but as far as hands on,
Mhm.
like I'm fine being patient. I'm fine waiting. I'm in no crazy rush. I'm also not like a wild Final Fantasy VII fan either, like some people might be. Like it's a great game, but it's not in my
Yeah.
top 5.
No,
But
I'm with you there. I think I wasn't patient enough to wait to play Rebirth after it released, but I'm certainly patient enough to wait between installments. And to a certain extent, and I totally agree if people don't agree with this, and do you also if you want to wait for all 3 games at once, I think that's awesome. But for me, I actually really am appreciating the gap between games because of letting story breathe. That was brought up in chat, but also the theory crafting and all that has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed the
Yeah.
wait between each game and allowing us to like inspect it and replay it and look at it in different lenses, through different
Mhm.
lenses. Like I think, especially Rebirth, the way it ended, I think I love it. And we're not going to go into spoilers, of course, but I love it. I absolutely love what they did at the end
Yeah.
of Rebirth.
mhm.
And I think what I'm expecting in my mind, which might not come to fruition, but what I have in my mind of what they might want to do with that ending and what I think they will do with that ending. Oh man, like it's fantastic. I think there's a lot of different
Yeah.
directions they could go in though, and that's what's exciting as well. Is I could have it completely wrong, and I'd be happy to have it wrong, honestly. Because I got a lot wrong between Remake and Rebirth. I'll tell you, like I had some theories that did not pan out in Rebirth, and I'm totally okay with that. But it was really fun being on that ride with everybody on YouTube and all, just diving into every moment of this game and trying to figure out what was going to come next. It kind of reminds me of 7 in that way. Like when you finish disc
Mm.
1 or disc 2 or disc 3. Now, granted, we didn't have to wait 3 years between each, but it still had that cliffhanger feel where it's like, ooh, what's
Yeah,
going to
it
happen
did.
next?
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of an old school mentality that I think was brought back in a way
Mm.
by making it multiple parts.
There's a question to pose. Um, if they had the ability to have made it on one game, which
Mm.
they fundamentally did have that as an option, um, because they didn't have to flesh everything out to the degree they did. Um, do you think it would have sold better? Because I personally do.
I think
It did.
as one game, maybe it wouldn't have sold as much as all 3 parts combined, but I
Mhm.
think it as one game, it might have sold like 10 million or something like that. Sure. And that would have been really good sales for it. And it wouldn't have had near as much of a production budget, and they probably would have made more money back. And that's why I said earlier that I kind of respect them for doing this, because it's honestly the approach that is going to make them less money probably than if they were to do just one game
Mhm.
and capitalize on the fan base all at once. They took the road that was going to be the greater struggle overall, and I have to give them a little bit of credit for that.
Hmm.
Please don't mistake me on that. I adore the remake series so far. I hold my hand up and say it both games, like full games. I'm not including Crisis Core as of yet, but both of those two games have been some of the best games I have ever played by quite a long margin, and I am incredibly happy they did them. But I also like to throw the idea of what if.
Hmm.
No, I understand completely, and we'll never know for sure. I mean, they kind of did the Ever Crisis release, or they still are, kind of in a way to get something a little bit closer to the original, but we're never going to know what it would have been like if they tried to do one game. We got a few more responses, but let's keep it to one. And Noctis, would you want to take it? Maybe Logan's response here. You want to read that off for us?
Yeah, I got you. Logan says, I've played both Remake and Rebirth and honestly absolutely love both of them. I've been working my way slowly through Rebirth since just not a lot of time for gaming at the moment, and honestly, every session has been a joy from the mini games to the story and all the small kinds of interaction and nostalgia. Aside from what other people have mentioned about PlayStation exclusivity and waiting for the trilogy, I also think it's fair to call out that we're in a cost of living crisis, and a lot of people are really living on the breadline at the moment. A lot of people simply can't afford luxury items such as brand new games and have to budget with either cheaper alternatives or are forced to pick what game they want most and wait for others until a later date. It's a vicious cycle since I fear that amazing games like this are going to be thought of as underperforming, but just a tough time in the world right now.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, we fortunately, I think they did do a couple things that I think were smart. The dual pack to have both games for $70, I think was a really good move. And I hope
Absolutely.
a lot of people took advantage of that.
100%.
They put 7 Remake Integrate even on PS Plus for free for a period, and then is on extra for a while if you had extra. And we had the Days of Play recently, which lowered down at 25% off for 7 Rebirth just a few months after release. It's already 25% off. So I hope people took advantage of that if they feel like they wanted to wait. But of course, the price will continue to come down, and I wouldn't be surprised if 7 Rebirth is on PS Plus or Xbox Game Pass or something like that in the future. And then those that felt like they needed to wait will have that opportunity and experience an amazing game, you know.
I want to bring up something that is in chat really quick before we move on to the next topic. Is a Jedi Piggy Prime said, I'm so happy that they're splitting it between 3 games because I never played OG. So it's giving me time to enjoy a ton of the story in a non-rushed way. That's actually really nice for the next generation to be able to let people experience a really big story in segments and not having to push it on you all at once.
Yeah. I've loved reading the opinions of those that never played OG and went straight into Remake and Rebirth. To me, it's like crazy because I think there's so much that is in Remake and Rebirth that requires you to sort of know the original and what they're doing with it, like how they're tweaking it and doing a sort of meta game with it that I'm not going to get into. But it's still really cool. It's really cool to watch playthroughs for those that don't know anything about 7, and they're just like on the edge of their seat, kind of the way we were when we played the original back in 97 or whatever. So it is very cool to see that, and I'm glad that there are I think it was Piggy Prime that you said that. I'm glad Piggy Prime got to experience it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm on the fence. I'm on the side of I recommend playing the remake series before OG. I currently do. And not by a small margin. I thoroughly recommend it that way around.
I think it would be hard for some people to go back to OG after doing Remake and Rebirth. I don't know. It's just already I've implored people to play OG, and I've experienced many come back to me and say I can't do it. Like I don't want to do ATB. The graphics aren't good enough. This and this. I'll say, oh, do you know all the mods on PC? Do Echo S7, that helps too. But some people just don't want to go back to that era. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I love the OG. I've played it once a year ever since it came out in 1997, right? One of my favorite games of all time. That said, students will ask me, do I have to play the original before I play the new trilogy? And I would say, if that's not your style of game, no, don't worry about it. Because by the end, I do believe, and this isn't a spoiler or anything, but I do believe that they're trying to create a self-contained, self-referential trilogy that exists on its own. But time will tell.
I agree with you. No, I
on that
100%
one.
agree with you.
So
when it's all said and done, I think people will be able to play through trilogy and have a complete story on its own. I 100% agree with that.
yeah, but for right now, we are getting, those of us who have played the OG, we get a very different experience because we've got that lens of the OG, and it's like, okay, how are they working with this, riffing this, changing this, all that kind of stuff, and it creates all kinds of like nostalgia trauma almost. It's like,
Yeah.
Well, this is different. This is the same pickup. This is the same. But wait, this is different. Oh, wait.
Exactly.
right.
Let's bring Final Fantasy 16 into the fold. We haven't talked enough Final Fantasy 16 yet, and it's going to be a big part of our topic of the month. We're going to pit these two against each other, but not in a negative way. I really don't want, I'm going to say this right now in chat, behave yourselves. This is not Final Fantasy 16 versus 7 Rebirth. Like, this one's better than this one. No, this one sucks.
We're not that kind of people. We're not that kind of podcast.
No negativity in that way, please, in chat. We're going to talk about what each did right and wrong and why they're sort of being compared and contrasted differently. Even though they've done some of the same things, they're being treated differently. And they didn't release that far apart. I mean, what was 16? June of last year, something like that?
Yeah.
June 22nd,
Whereas February for 7 Rebirth, like, that is the closest you're ever probably going to see huge, like, I'll call them mainline Final Fantasy releases be together, even though Rebirth is kind of not mainline. It's in a weird hybrid area, but still, like, that's kind of crazy to get huge Final Fantasy games so close together. So obviously you're gonna get comparison between the two of them, and there's gonna be people that are like Team 16, Team 7 Rebirth. So what I want to start off first in the discussion, and we'll go to you, Noctis. What were your expectations before release for 16 and 7 Rebirth? Like, your hype level, things like that.
My hype levels for both were astronomical. But the 16, when it was so different. I felt like I went into Rebirth thinking that I knew what I was getting because it was part 2 of a trilogy, and I'd played Remake multiple times and I loved it. And I was like, okay, well, that's going to be more of the same, but maybe with an open world. 16, I was like, I've never really experienced a Final Fantasy like this. And I kept on thinking, even as I was watching trailers, like, I'm almost getting some of the darker tones of Final Fantasy 6 and 4 in a fully realized fantasy realistic world. And I was thrilled beyond belief because I'd never seen anything like that in this franchise that I love.
Yeah, I go into myself real quick before we jump over to Shoop. I will admit my hype levels for 16 weren't as high as I wanted them to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't figure out why I wasn't through the roof excited for it, because I wanted to be. Final Fantasy is my favorite franchise ever. So every time they would show a trailer for 16, especially the first few trailers, I was like, why am I not feeling the way I want to feel right now? And I don't know if it was because they took just like a world approach that wasn't my vibe. I think I do sort of vibe a little bit more with like quirky, unique styles, where this felt like it's just a little bit more old school, like things we've seen a million times before. Now that I played the full game, I do think it does its own thing in a lot of ways, and I think it stands on its own. But the first trailers, I did kind of get that been there, done that feel a little bit, where I was kind of hoping with a new mainline entry that I was like, oh man, this is like unlike anything we've ever seen in Final Fantasy before. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Now, I'll say this, like, Square Enix, PlayStation, Sony, every show always happens when I'm teaching class. And so we actually watched the state of play in my Final Fantasy 15 class. Okay.
That's
so
awesome.
like they showed the trailer and they were like, Dr. Linger, are you crying? Are you crying? I was like, you shut up. I will fail you. And so like it hit me immediately when I saw that trailer. So I was sold day one.
If I had you as a professor, I wouldn't have dropped out of college. I'm just saying.
I'm trying to remember.
Now you get my lecture streams for free. So it's like you're going to college all over again.
We didn't watch the reveal for 16 together, did we, Shoop?
We did not watch the reveal of 16 together. We watched the release date reveal of 16 together.
Okay,
That's the trailer we reacted to. I personally, for my expectations, my expectations were actually very high before release. It's right up my alley. I love high fantasy. I love medieval. I loved, like I said, loved Game of Thrones before the last season. I was very hyped for this. I loved seeing the women introduced in the trailers the way that they were introduced. We're talking trailers. We're talking pre-release. Seeing Benedicta, seeing Jill, seeing Shiva in these trailers. I'm sorry if I just piqued your ears, but I was so excited. So excited. And then I was wildly depressed because I didn't have a PS5, but that's another story that we already covered. Seeing the icons brought, as they're called in this game, icons, summons, aeons, GFs, eidolons, whatever you have them. the whole crystal theme. I was like, they are bringing it back to my roots. And I was hype. So hype. Seeing Garuda, I was like, we haven't had a Garuda in a Final Fantasy in ages. This is wildly up my alley. So I was a mess. I was all over the floor every time a new trailer would drop. I was just like, this is amazing.
I'm trying to give the appropriate shout out to Noctis right now in chat. If you guys aren't noticing, his name with the Twitch symbol is literally right below his face right now. Prof Noctis.
I tried to give him a shout out earlier.
I have like a lot of things turned off for Crystal Bearers.
Okay.
So sorry about that, guys.
But anyway, and then we'll get obviously into first impression, story, combat, pacing, and then sales later. But Easley, what were your first impressions? Like when you first saw the trailers for it?
So, in a really console dependent way, I was not excited at all because I didn't have a PS5 at the time.
High five.
I remember, yeah, we obviously had the same situation happen, but I was very much like, I'm not going to be able to play it. It'd be great to watch, but I'm not bothered. And then the moment I got it, I started trying, but it was already too late. I was a bit behind in terms of my expectations until the demo got released. And it took seeing people play the demo. I deliberately didn't play the demo, even though I could. I deliberately didn't. It took the demo being released for me to go, okay, actually, this could be an amazing game. And you guys will remember I said this could be game of the year if the game is like this all the way through. Granted,
I
not my feelings
Drew
altogether.
When they played the demo, and I agreed.
Yeah, that leads right into first impressions. The demo for a lot of us were the first impressions. And the reason I didn't play 7 Rebirth's demo is because I played 16's demo. And that's not because I didn't like 16's demo. It's because I loved 16's demo. And it was hard for the game to live up to that, in all honesty. It started off on such an amazing high note that it did sort of come down after that. Overall, I ended up liking the game because I think I did set my expectations for 16 right where I should have set them. And it kind of delivered exactly what I expected that game to deliver. So I ended up liking it. But it didn't match that initial impressions because, man, that demo, that was like an amazing moment. Like I remember
one of the best demos of all time.
Like I remember the
Hands
conversation
down.
when that released. Everybody was talking about that game. Like we got a 95 on Metacritic, you guys. This is gonna be game of the year. Like I cried. I was angry. I was screaming at the game. Like like it hooked us. It really hooked us.
Everyone on my follow list was playing this demo, and half of them have never touched Final Fantasy before. I was sat there like, okay, this is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the first 2 hours of that game are, I dare say, immaculate. Very well done.
Yeah.
They really throw you right into things.
It made me wish we got more time with them when they were younger.
Oh, same. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
The demo could have been them as younger, like all the way. It could have just been that. And then maybe a very small snippet just at the end of not even playable, just seeing them as their adult selves. And that would have been perfect to me. It would have managed my expectation lower and given me all fresh content.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we're not going to go into deep spoilers here. We're going to keep it surface level. So I do want to jump over to 7 Rebirth real quick, which also had a demo. And it was a demo that was very early in the game, although not actually the beginning of the game for 7 Rebirth. They kind of tricked us on that one. But here's what I will say, and this kind of goes along with expectations before release as well. The opening, and that is the demo portion that they released for 7 Rebirth, is exactly what I expected them to do for years. After Remake release, I was like, this is what they have to do. It's the perfect way to open this game. There's no better way to open Rebirth than with I'll just say the flashback moment. And for me, oh man, did they deliver on it. And that opening just, I love it because of course the game explodes in scale and size and explorability after that, but keeping this tight opening, sort of the way 16 did as well. I think you can compare them in that way. They both kind of had that big opening story chapter moment to hook us with a sort of devastating moment. I'll just say, I'm not gonna go into detail, but devastating moment. So they kind of are very similar actually in that way. They both really hooked me right from the start. Are you the same, Noctis?
Oh, absolutely. It's what I had been dreaming of for 3 years or however long, 4 years, I guess. Because I was like, it's got to start like this. And playing that demo, I did not play all three demos, I guess. Were there three or two? I can't remember. I did not play the open world one, I
Mm.
guess. But playing it, I was just beyond hyped. And the way that the things that I had imagined were fully fleshed out and realized, even more than I thought. It all just kind of blew my mind. So incredible hype from that.
Um,
I won't spoil anything. Obviously, I haven't played Rebirth, but I've seen it all. But I'm really glad that the demo for Rebirth wasn't its opening like 16
Hmm.
was.
I'm glad
Hmm.
that they
Yes.
left a surprise for us.
It was because
Yeah.
it's Seven's Rebirth or
It's good.
Seven Rebirth's opening is really wonderful, and I think it would have spoiled a really great moment if they had made that as a demo. It's a
Right.
lot more special than
Agreed.
just be like, we'll just make this the demo part. Like, no, this is a really special
Agreed.
thing.
And I got to experience that organically. Like I did not expect that. I was totally expecting the game to start the way that I knew the demo started. So when
Hmm.
it didn't, I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
Like I was like, "Wow, they're are they doing this? Are they really
Yeah,
doing this
my
right
jaw
now?"
dropped.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like those kind of
Hmm.
moments are what makes Seven Rebirth special because they are
Hmm.
playing with us, right? They know what a large portion of the fan base that has played Seven OG and knows it so well was expecting, especially because they released a demo." And they're like, nope, we got you. Like we're gonna pull the rug out from under you and do something a little different. I thought that was a really cool moment. Easily, did you play the demo for Seven Rebirth?
No.
You didn't.
Same process as 16. Even though I could, I inherently avoid demos. Um, and this is due to, as Shoop's put in chat, the Final Fantasy VIII demo. This is why I skipped them. Um,
I remember
I
it.
I literally have the demo disc in my Final Fantasy VII case behind me. The demo where you get Leviathan in Dalit mission, which you don't get.
Hmm.
Um, you start with Renoa, which you don't, and I have all of these parts, and I was like, "Wow, I get this." And then I thought I did something wrong through my first playthrough because I didn't have Leviathan early, and Leviathan is one of my favorite summons. As Shoot will tell you, I given how I reacted in 16 before the DLCs, but
Where
I'm not
the
going to say
fuck
why,
is
but
Leviathan?
I was so angry and that I couldn't actually get this, and that's why I don't play demos very much anymore.
I've
I
never
don't
heard
want the game opinion to be ruined.
I've never heard a British man say Leviathan over and over again so many times in the course of like 4 hours.
That's
Because we,
awesome.
Drew and I both beat 16 before Easley did. Easley was like
Mm.
bouncing from game to game, speed running this game, then like dabbling at 16, and then playing some 7 remake, and then what have you. And so he's playing 16 at a snail's pace. And every time I would tune into his stream, it was just, where is Leviathan?
Th- this is inherently why I feel I didn't massively enjoy it as much as you guys, because
Mm,
I was bouncing because I didn't gel with the game.
Hmm.
yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, sometimes setting expectations can be a dangerous thing, very dangerous thing.
Mhm.
Continue on with story with keeping it surface level. I would say this is probably the area of my little outline here that really contrasts the two games the most, right?
Hmm.
Completely different vibes,
Hmm.
atmospheres
Mhm.
Yeah.
between 7 Rebirth and 16. And in some ways, you kind of are seeing the past of Final Fantasy versus what might be the future of Final Fantasy, right? 7 Rebirth, to me, and I don't mean this in a way that I don't want to try and start something up here, but it felt more Final Fantasy to me because to me, Final Fantasy has always been about this balance, right? Of heavy story moments, drama, intrigue, melodrama, but undercut all of that with levity and humor and ridiculousness. Like that's sort of been a mainstay of the franchise and always has been. And 16 went a different direction. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they went more like straightforward, like there's not a lot of levity in
Mm.
16. There really is not. I chuckled a couple times maybe, but I really was feeling mostly down while I was playing 16. It's mostly I don't want to say depressing game, but it's got some heavy stuff. It's a pretty heavy game.
It's very
Very
dreary. I
dreary.
think
Yeah.
I experienced it as
Mhm.
dreary.
So in that way, we kind of have a big contrast here, and I do think it sort of represents different eras of Final Fantasy, in my opinion. Um, let's go to you, Noctis, first. I'm curious, like, if you think there's a place for both, if you prefer one or the other, just kind of go take it how you want.
I'm not sure either one is going to dictate the future of Final Fantasy. What I liked about this, and going to the story itself, the tone of the game has to mirror the story that they are telling, and I felt like 16 did a really good job of that. Now, were there ways in the world that they could have added some mini games, for example? Absolutely, there would have been. And I think that that would have given a little bit of light in a pretty, as you said, Shoop, dreary world. There needed to be um, a little bit more light, and I think that there are some ways that they could have done that. But all that to say, like, the story that they were telling, I think in some ways demanded that serious
Oh,
tone
100%.
throughout.
Yeah.
And I
They went for it.
appreciated
They
it
had to
for
own
it.
it, right?
They really did. Now you still get some of that kind of bonkers stuff. I think that the Game of Thrones comparisons end by like chapter hour 10 or so, where it's like, okay, there's clearly some
Significant
more
changes, yeah.
Mm.
cosmic things that are happening,
Yeah,
I guess.
for
And I think
sure.
that was really, really interesting to me. And I was like, oh, there's the Final Fantasy aspects of this
Hmm.
that I was missing. So it was it riffed on the Final Fantasy formula in a way that I really appreciated.
I 100% agree that it's very Final Fantasy. By the time you get,
Yeah,
even
Hmm.
a couple chapters in, it's hardcore Final Fantasy
yeah.
without a doubt. In like
Now,
the mystical fantasy elements.
yeah, the thing that I would say though is that it is Clive's story, whereas Rebirth really, I mean, even though it is largely Cloud's story and Cloud's perspective, you are getting significant relational dynamic and chemistry among the
Yep,
characters. In fact, I would dare say that is the point of that game, that the
100%.
affinity system, the relational side quests and stuff. So it just feels completely different in its storytelling ability, which makes sense, I guess, with a cohesive, um, fully, I would say more open world rather than open zone style of 16. So
Yeah. Just a comment on chat real quick, just to clarify what I meant. You are not playing 16 wrong at all, Lunchbox. If you're not feeling down or depressing, I think what I was feeling is a lot of that game, and again, keep it surface level, specifically focusing on the bears and
mm,
what they experience. Like
It's
that
very
is at
sad.
the forefront of like the entire game. The entire game is sort
mhm,
of about their suffering,
Mm.
and it really kind of beats you down with that, in my opinion, throughout the whole playthrough. Like it's a part of the world, and like as
yeah.
Noctis said, like they that's the story they wanted to tell. So to have it be dreary in a sense, that works for it, but that
Mhm.
was it was kind of hard to keep experiencing that over and over and over again. And I don't mean that in like a like I don't want to keep playing this game, but it was tough. Like that's a lot of messed up stuff going on in that world for all those
Yeah.
characters. So I thought it was a little bit of a downer for me in that way, to continuously see that over and over and over again throughout the entire playthrough, really, for the most part.
There's a small visual aspect I want to throw into a question here. The game itself is obviously incredibly dark story-wise, but
Mhm.
it's also very dark visually. Majority of the game lacks color, and one of the comments they had was for lack of color, and so one of the DLCs does now contain a lot more color, and it's been
Mhm.
very well received. Do you feel the game would still have been just as dark to play if it had a little bit more light? Just a little bit, just to give you that little tonal
We trying to
changes
compare
every
this to
so
Final Fantasy
often.
IX right now? Is that what we're doing?
Well, I mean, you look at Nine Story is incredibly
It
dark,
is.
but
It
it
is.
doesn't feel dark. It has very, very serious tones, but I'm not sat here going "Whew," all the way through. Whereas 16, I felt lacked a little bit of pick me up at points. Just a little one. Just something that made me go, okay, it's not just doom and gloom.
Right.
I think for me personally, and this is like I'm gonna do my absolute best here to word this in such a way that does not spoil anything. I had a lot of hopes, I think, for certain characters and what they could bring to the table in 16. And um I hate using this word, but I'm going to use this word. I feel like they got fridged.
Mm.
There were certain characters, like especially just based off of trailers, that I was like, oh, we're gonna see a lot of this person, and we're gonna see a lot of what this person is capable of, and then we get cut off from that, and I'm kind of left slightly disappointed. Whereas, like, remember the whole discourse on Twitter of what is a Final Fantasy? I mean, a Final Fantasy has the name Final Fantasy. It's produced by Square Enix. It's released by Square Enix. It's published by Square Enix. It's Final Fantasy. And a lot of Final Fantasy, though, has to do with like togetherness. And I think that's maybe part of like what Noctis, what you were touching on about in Rebirth. While it is like mostly Cloud's story, yes, we get a lot of these characters working together and these characters developing because of each other. And I wanted a little bit more of that in 16. There are certain characters that I wanted to see develop because of Clive, or I wanted to see Clive develop because of them. And I was a little sad that I didn't get more of that, I think, in 16. Like, I love Aerith and Tifa's relationship in Rebirth. I love the way that they bring out each other's best qualities. Like, Tifa's never had like a real like girlfriend to do like really fun things with, and Aerith's never had like that bad bitch to back her up. Like, it's really nice having them balance each other out.
Yeah.
And I feel in 16, Clive is clearly the main character and everybody else is support. You know?
Yeah, I think there was definitely,
That's
if
fair.
they want to continue on and develop from 16, I think they could do amazing things with developing more of a party dynamic around that battle system, and a little bit more of a camaraderie feeling by having them play off each other. I think for me, 7 Rebirth actually reminds me a little bit of 15 in a way, Noctis, in that when you really break it down, there's not a lot of plot in Rebirth. If you really break it down, right? Like, if you really kind of take the story milestones, there's it's pretty concise, right? You can summarize that story pretty darn quickly, but it's about the journey that these characters are going on, and the relationship building throughout it. It's a road trip, but not on the road. They're trekking across mountains, they're sailing across seas, but it's all about the journey of them together and the relationships that develop between them throughout that. And for me, that has always been the strength of Final Fantasy VII are the characters. Like, it's my favorite group ever, because I do think they play off each other so well, and I think there's tension and there's love, and they bash against each other in all the right ways. There's clearly a lot of love. There's so much love between these characters, and I really vibe with that. And I think Rebirth mastered that. I feel like the relationships between all the characters was front and center, and giving us as much time as possible with these characters throughout this world. A lot of that involving the side quests, a lot of those involving the mini games even. Those were the moments actually that developed these characters and their relationships. And that's what's missing for me from 16, is you don't have those. You don't really have a lot of side quests where it's like, let me completely develop my relationship with this person in a meaningful way. I feel like all of the side quests in 16 had one culminating final mission where it's like, okay, here we go. That's the one I was waiting for. That final mission actually brought it home. That was good. Good job. But all the ones before that was like, all right, I'm just waiting for the culmination here. Whereas every single green exclamation point check mark mission in 7 Rebirth, which was about building character and literally building relationship points and all that, oh my, I didn't want to miss a single one of them. There wasn't a single one of them I wanted to miss, because I was worried that I wasn't going to get those moments and establish the relationships that I love so much between these characters. So I do think, the story of 16, the plots of 16 is really great. When you break down like the mythology and everything they're trying to tell, and I say this about 15 too. I know you're a big fan of 15, Noctis, but for me, my problem with 15 is that it has an amazing plot, and I think somewhat lackluster storytelling. I think that the plot is they don't do a service to it, and that's where the disappointment comes in, because I see it. I read the cosmology or whatever like that was called in the game. I was like, oh my god, the mythology in this game is amazing. Why aren't you telling it better? Come on. Like, why are you skipping around and not giving us the moments that we should be getting that tell this amazing mythology? And I think 16 was a little bit for that as well. And it's not because they didn't tell the mythology. They did in 16. It was very verbose, actually. They told a lot of that mythology. It wasn't entertaining to me. Like, they weren't doing it in a way that really vibed for me.
No,
I loved
feel
15.
That. I am so glad to hear that. I know I liked you.
I think 15 is really, really strong as well. I think it gets a lot of hate when it shouldn't.
Listen, I think it's one of the best stories in Final Fantasies told in the worst way possible. That's what I tell my
That's
classes.
no, that's
Yeah.
a great way to put it. I
Yeah.
mean, I really enjoyed 15 a lot. Obviously, we're not really. This isn't a 15 episode. When we do a 15 episode, we'll bring you back
Yeah,
on.
we got to bring Noctis
No,
back for
please
our 15
do.
episode.
But
I'll spill it all.
I really loved 15, but there were certain, again, like character developments, which is my kind of issue with 16 as well. Women,
Hmm.
that I wanted more of,
Yeah.
and I don't want to go too deep into 15.
That's very
but there
fair.
was, yeah.
That is such a great and valid point, though. With 15, I would dare say with 16 as well, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. One thing that I saw in Rebirth, like you, Drew, like the banter among your party members when you're on
Mhm.
a side quest, things like that. That's something you do not get in 16, at least until the second DLC. Because I was playing it on stream and I was like, "Whoa, is that banter I hear? Are they talking while I'm walking? That's amazing."
I
Mhm.
know.
The
It-
banter in
because
Rebirth is really fantastic.
And what's
oh,
crazy
I
too,
think it's a
Yeah.
perfect balance in
Noctis, real
Rebirth.
quick, just to say,
Whereas,
I just
yeah,
want to say
please.
real quick, at the very beginning of 16, that very first quest with Sid where you're going through the forest, there was banter, and I was like, oh, this is what I was waiting for. And then it just like
Yeah.
stops.
Yeah.
Like throughout the
And then
rest of
it's
the game, it
not
just
there.
there's not there. But they got my
And
Yeah.
hopes up that they were gonna do it.
I totally get that because in 15, again, best story told in the worst way possible. You're journeying around and you're getting critical conversations while you are running around, and then a battle will initiate. And that conversation that's so integral to the plot stops and you never hear it again.
Hmm.
And so I feel like they've gotten better with that. And by the time they've gotten to Rebirth, it's like, okay, we can actually do some of this traveling conversation and not lose the story with it.
Yeah.
So Gav is my like he is the character that brought the best banter, the best laugh, that
Gabo!
Gavin!
that
Hands
Gabo!
down.
only real levity in 16. That is he is the
Yeah,
character that gave me that little bit of joy.
I agree.
I don't know.
And
Karen kind of did it for me too, though.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh,
I liked
yeah,
old
we
lady
love
Karen.
her.
Yeah.
and speaking of banter, I just wish it was across more people.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
why was there not more from Sid ripping into Clive? Why was there not some kind of a joke? I'm not going to say it character wise, but there could have been so many little points to be like it just lacked it.
They could have been
Lacked
the
that
same with
banter so
Jill too. I think Jill and Clive could have had
yes.
so much more banter
Yes.
between each
Yeah.
other.
I feel like we're very down on 16 right now,
Sorry.
so I want to kind of twist a little bit. I mean, just like ask the question from a storytelling standpoint, or however direction you want to go with it. What do you guys think 16 did better than 7 Rebirth?
Tone. I'll just say.
Mm.
So they let you. We've all said it to some degree. We felt the dreariness. We felt the pain. And one
Mhm.
critique that I would have of Rebirth is that we don't feel the dreariness enough.
The tonal
Um,
whiplash, kind
I,
of.
I give you that, yeah.
tonal whiplash.
Yeah,
And it's like we sat in it too long in 16 and not enough in Rebirth.
Yeah,
I agree. I
agree.
think that
Yeah.
they had these like really amazing moments, and they just needed to let us sit in them a little bit longer. Cosmo
Yeah.
Canyon, let us sit there a little bit before the other guy comes in. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna say what happens, but before the other guy
Sure.
comes in, let us sit on this for a second. Like I just got teary eyed. Let the tears fall.
There was
You
a
know, like,
certain there was a certain moment in Rebirth for me that I was like, oh my god, this is, and I'm a very emotional gamer. I play
Mhm.
these games in this series because I want to feel it, and I want to feel it hard. And there's a certain moment in Rebirth, and I'm not going to
a
spoil
Barrett heavy
anything.
moment. I'm
No.
assuming
It
you're
was
talking
a
about.
Barrett moment,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love
Yeah.
Barrett. I love that man. And I was like, this is it. This is it. This is where I lose all composure. And I was getting there and I was losing my
Oh, I
composure.
fucking sobbed.
And then, yeah, the tonal shift. And I was just like,
Yeah,
but I was
Go
just
battle.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just about to fall on the floor crying. I was just
Yeah.
almost out of my seat crying. And then they kind
yeah.
of took
They
it away
threw
from
us
me.
in the
And I was
battle
like,
way too quickly
"Ah."
after that. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point in Rebirth, the only point that really hit me was in Temple of the Ancients. That's all I'm going to say on
Mhm.
that.
Oh my
But
god.
not
Yeah.
just the one that obviously Shoop and Drew, not just that one person, not that part. All of them there. Barrett's in particular, like you know,
To put a
that was the
blanket
point to
statement
me.
over it without spoiling it, we're going to just call it the
The
trials.
trials. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
the
Yeah.
trials are the part that hit me harder than any point in that game
Mhm.
by a long way. even near the end, that one of those final moments didn't quite hit me. It definitely did to some of you, like Drew. I know it hit you a lot.
Oh yeah.
It didn't hit me in that same way. Where, and I don't know if that's because I just had the trials not that long ago, because I got through that final bit quite quick. I don't know if that's why, but I just didn't feel that impact quite as heavy as I wanted, and I felt I should have. Maybe it's because I knew what was possibly happening.
I think
Maybe not.
it's very interesting also for those of you who have maybe not played these games yourself, but enjoy watching like your favorite streamers play them, that as viewers, we can react differently based on how you react while you're playing it. And I experienced that also with 16, but with what Easley was saying about the trials, I went back and watched his VOD of that part, and just knowing his personal IRL connection to that part in the game, I felt it that much more. And I had already watched them. I had watched them when Drew played it and it hit me hard. But watching Easley
Mm.
play it and knowing how he connected to it, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
Knowing how personally tied somebody is to a moment in the game, and then watching them experience it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, what was special about the trials is it took things that we already knew technically, but it for in some ways showed us it. We never saw it before in some
Yeah.
situations, but also it laid into those moments in such a heavy way. Like those were, going to Noctis' point, that was the moment where they let us sit in it, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Like Aerith's especially, they really make you sit in that moment. Like when they have
Yeah.
you control and have her walk, again, not gonna go too far here, but when they have you control that moment, like they were like almost going too far. I was like, oh my God, this is a
very
lot.
heavy.
This is a lot you're putting us through right now.
But that's what the demo of 16 did for us as well.
That's
Yeah.
it.
It really I can't. You want to talk about who did what better? 16 did their demo better by far.
Yeah.
Their
That was
their
good demo, yeah.
intro
I can agree with that.
to get you
Yeah.
immersed into meeting these characters. The way you meet these characters is brutal on the heart.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like,
And I agree with Taser when chat says the one thing that 16 does better for me is spectacle. 16's best moments come from its set pieces, like certain boss fights. Those moments are incredibly cinematic and spectacular, but it struggles to keep that momentum for the rest of the game. My comment to that would be, just wait for part 3 of Remake, though, right? Because
Yeah.
what's so great, in my opinion, about the
Yeah.
trajectory we're on is we got Midgar, very linear portion, just like it was in the OG. And the second part is less story heavy, and it's about exploration. It's about the world and being on this big journey with your friends. Part 3, that is the spectacle part. Get the weapons in there. They could do the exact same thing they did with the major icon battles with the weapon battles in part 3. I think we're going to see some crazy stuff in part 3.
there's
But I
a
agree.
part.
know,
Go ahead.
we know that the 16 team and the Rebirth team did kind of cross-examine one another. They were looking at what each other was doing, side quests, dialogue, transitions, open world sort of stuff. And I'm really curious if the Rebirth team was looking at some of those very large-scale boss battles, thinking for part 3. I'm really curious if they're learning those lessons.
There's some DNA in there for sure. Even in the
Yeah.
combat, which we're about to get to right now, I do think there's some DNA, some
Yeah.
I want to say dino DNA, but I'm going to resist.
The Dino DNA.
Dino DNA. So let's go to combat real quick. We kind of touched on a little bit that they're both action based to an extent. I personally feel like the Remake Rebirth battle system is still holding on to the true heart of ATB. I will argue that to the day I die, that ATB is still very much a part of that system in an amazing way. But I get it. It looks like an action game. It does, and sometimes it plays like an action game. Whereas 16, it really is the most action that we've. It's
Yeah.
borderline Devil May Cry-ish, I would say at times.
It's a good comparison.
For better and for worse. I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about them trying to hit younger audiences, and I think trying to go a little bit more accessible, a little bit more mainstream maybe. I think they went a little too far with it personally, or I think they could have at least allowed options for us that wanted something a little bit more deep, because for me, I was just waiting
Side
for
summons.
I was waiting for the systems to grow and develop further than they did. Right. This is gonna be the one area where I am gonna kind of go against 16 a little harder, because like there's no reason that they couldn't have had elemental affinities and damages and weaknesses and strengths. There's no reason they couldn't have had status ailments. There's no reason that a lot of these mainstays of Final Fantasy couldn't have been introduced into the Final Fantasy XVI battle system. I don't know
Hmm.
why they simplified it to the degree that they did. Even if they were like, no, we want this to be Clive's game. It's going to be him and only him. No playable party members. Okay. A little disappointed. I think they probably could have done that as well. But my bigger disappointment is that the things that clearly, in my opinion, could have worked within this battle system were not introduced. And I don't understand why.
I'm I'm
I
I'm in
don't.
agreement as far as like the elements and the status ailments and things like that. But as someone who is very noob like, not nude, noob like to action based games, I thought this was a great introductory point for somebody like me.
Yeah.
I'm very turn
I agree.
based,
Yeah.
I'm very old school, and I think accessibility for learning new play styles is really important too. And having like those extra accessories that can help you time things better. I will agree with someone in chat who just said about it being button mashy. I have horrible arthritis and my hands would hurt, especially during the big icon fights, the big boss fights. And
Mm.
it's like separate. There's so many phases in these boss fights and they're really cool and graphically incredible. But my hands hurt. And I would have liked my hands to not hurt so much. I would have liked a little bit more tact in what the moves are rather than just
Mhm.
mashing X or pressing square at a certain time,
Yeah.
pressing R1 at a certain time.
There was a lot of um you hit a point in 16's combat where it was fantastic on initial input. Everything felt incredible. It was beautiful. It was stunning. It was you try and hit these fantastically big numbers, try and change your build, hit big numbers, but ultimately every battle ended up being the same. Because they
Yeah.
didn't have,
Hmm.
in my eyes, how can you have a character who can use X number of summons and they're all meant to be different elemental? How do we not have, even if you don't want to give a status, how do we not have elemental variances? Like, we could have had. I'm going to throw Genshin back into this, right? Genshin, you chain elements. You literally chain them. And you can go fire into ice and it gives you a melt effect. You can go lightning into fire and you get an explosion effect. Why didn't we have that? That's something so basic that would have increased your damage, it would have increased your playability, increased combinations.
Right.
It's just
It
that would have
hurts.
made such a
It
difference.
Hmm.
hurts even more now because with the new updates, they added like presets and stuff like that. This was what they should have done from the beginning. Imagine having all these different presets with different elemental
Yeah.
affinities based on your summons you have equipped, and you can on the fly, you have 5 different presets, R1 between different presets based on the type of enemies you're facing, based on their elemental affinity. And then it's not just like, for me, I pretty much settled in on 3 icons by like halfway through, and then I didn't really want to change
Hmm.
after that. They
Yeah.
needed to have more reason for us to want to switch up the arrangement that we got used to, but
Well,
we kind of, most people I see settled into their zone, got comfortable with certain icons, and then did not want to change because like, no, I got these figured
I
out, the game's easy, I'm going through battles quickly. They needed to give us a reason, they needed to force us to have
I
to
I
change.
agree, but I will say my playthrough, Easley's playthrough, Drugel's playthrough, and anyone else, a couple friends of mine who played through 16 and really really loved. I have one friend who really loves 16. Um, all of us had different builds. None of us had the same build.
Yeah.
Not
Hmm.
I had my build and I loved it. I won't say what it was because like some of the icons could spoil something for somebody. Easley's was completely different. Drew's was like just all DPS. Like
Yeah.
Easley's was much more brute force. Mine was speed. Like it was really cool
But to my
seeing.
point, did you not settle in on 3 icons and pretty much stay the same? Like you didn't
No,
even use Titan a single time.
no, I did
Uh,
not use him a single time. But you know what? That's fine because I still had so many options to choose from, and I
No, I'm just
found
saying, like,
a set
wouldn't it
that
have
I
been
really
cool if you
enjoyed.
felt some sort of incentive to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's figure out Titan. You
I
know?
I think that
guess.
I think for me when I was thinking about the combat, it wasn't ever the question of can I beat a boss or a fight with my makeup, my setup, but it was always how quickly can I do it? Like, is there a better way to do this? This game it almost begs for replayability. Like,
Yeah.
can you do that fight better? Can you get a better score? In fact, they included an arcade mode for that very purpose. This is an action game, so really try to min max your abilities, and really that's where the strategy comes in. But it's still accessible enough that with any setup you can win, and that's something that I think that Remake and Rebirth don't quite do. They're not going to they're not it's not gonna be competitive, right? You're not gonna be gauging how fast did I beat this guy versus, what this person over here is doing.
I
Um,
slightly disagree.
Yeah, I would have
do
to
you?
disagree there
Slightly.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Because
I want
there
Noctis to
is
finish
time.
his point though. Go ahead, Noctis.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's a lot more arcadey, whereas Remake and Rebirth just they don't have that.
I will agree it had the arcade element, especially in like
Mhm.
the levels, right? It had that classic Devil
Mhm.
May Cry like S level, especially if you went into the what was it called, where you go into that like battle mode and you can like try and get higher scores and all that. It
Yeah,
was
it's
called
arcade
something.
mode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
basically
it's
arcade
arcade
mode.
mode, yeah.
So that was very classic Devil May Cry, like try and get your score
Mhm.
up and
I
all that kind of
rage
stuff.
quit it. I was so bad at it.
But yeah, which is nice
Yeah.
that it had that challenge there. But unfortunately, I felt like that was isolated to that one mode. Whereas I think Seven Remake and especially Seven Rebirth, I think they really did this well in Seven Rebirth. It is that example of easy to play, difficult to master.
Mm.
And especially if you play on hard mode with Seven Rebirth, like you really have to sit in the materia system and check out different arrangements. Like there's so much customizability there. And now that you have
Mhm.
6, I think, playable characters on top of that, it's like the amount of arrangements and stuff you can do and add on the synergy skills and the synergy abilities. There's so much meat on the bones of that combat system. And to be fair, they had 7 Remake as the bones, the foundation
Yeah.
to build off of. So that's not quite fair to 16, because if the same 16 team does 17, they now have a foundation to build off of as well, and they could do something incredible with that. So I don't want to
Mhm.
say that they don't have the opportunity, but I do think that if we're just comparing apples to apples here directly, that there's so much more versatility and diversity and customizability in 7 Rebirth than there is 16.
I want to just chime in really quick that you said, like, what is the incentive to change up your build in 16? Something that you've already settled in that you're really comfortable with. The fact that you can remove ability points from any ability that you've put into and you get all of those points back, so you can try out as much as you want with no consequence,
Yeah, I love
is
that.
a big incentive. Like, it's different if like you put in your ability points and you can't get them back, but 16 really gives you that breathing room of like, you want to try to utilize a different icon, but you're unsure of how you feel about it. It's okay. You get your ability points back and go right back to whatever
Yeah,
you
7
want.
Rebirth as well. They both did that. That's
Thankfully,
the
they
right
both have
move.
that.
Yeah, they both
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
But it's a great point. Yeah, that's a nice accessibility feature that I feel like 10, 15 years ago you probably wouldn't have seen. And I'm very glad that they did that in both games.
I mean, I took all of my ability points off of the Garuda icon, like really early on, just like try out the next icon and try on the next icon. And I was like, nope, I love this takedown move way too much. And I'm using Garuda like nonstop.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Okay. I do want to interject about the combat of 16, because don't get me wrong, I did enjoy it. I spent a lot of time practicing different builds, and where Shoop says I was very much like that big damage numbers. I was slightly competing against another streamer for the highest combo. Um, his ended up being 500,000. Mine was six
Shout out
hundred
to
thousand.
Nerd Smash.
Yeah.
Yeah, who by the way is really rough time at the minute, but that's not for now. But I very firmly believe that the combat got stale due to the fact that you inherently had to block, you had to parry. After that, because there was no massive combo, it was mash mash ability, block parry. It was too limited, and that is due to the fault in my eyes of being one character.
Mhm.
Right.
Look at Rebirth. You have three characters in your fight. You have to factor in the sheer number of combos that you can have is simply just higher, and that's not a late on 16. That's not me saying
Mhm.
16's combat is bad. It's not. It really isn't. It is very well done for the game it is, and it and
Yeah, what's
it's
there is
very
great.
impactful. I just feel it fell a bit stale in terms of in a long fight. I'm not having variability.
It's a long
I'm
game, right? It's a big game, and when you have a big game like that and you have one character the whole way through, it's a lot different than Devil May Cry, to go back to it, that's 15 hours, maybe not even, maybe
Mm-hmm.
12 hours. So you're not really expecting the system to develop in a major way over the course of 12 hours. But when you have 80 hours, going even 10 hours, 15 hours without major additions to the gameplay system, and that's what it was. You were always waiting for the next icon to come in because the combat was starting to get stale, and it went, for me personally, went on a little bit too long between those big developments where I was like, I needed something a little sooner. I'm starting to feel like this combat system's getting stale. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Every battle is exactly the same. Hey, new icon, yes, something new to play with. 5 hours later, I kind of need something new again, guys. Give me something new. But then you're going through, if you went through, and I will admit I shouldn't have done this, going through every side quest, which really messes up the pacing, in my opinion, which we're going to talk about. Then you're really elongating that distance between new developments in the combat system, and that staleness becomes even more difficult to deal with. And I could tell Noctis wants to say something about this. Go ahead, Noctis.
There's a lot that can be said about 16's thing. I'll give you a quick anecdote. I was on a family vacation last year. My brother walked into the room. I had brought my PlayStation because 16 had just come out. Square Enix loves to release games just before 4th of July week every single year. This year, Dawn Trail, right? So I'm playing in kind of like our common living space area, and my brother walks in. My brother is not a gamer. He is a high school football coach, okay? Back when he was in high school, he played first-person shooters and FIFA. That's all he knows about video games. He walked in the room. He said, "Hey, what is this game?" I said, "It's Final Fantasy XVI." He said, "Huh, it looks like Call of Duty."
Oh my God.
I
And I was like,
remember your tweet.
Yeah, I got
remember
flamed on
that.
Twitter for it.
I
I got
know.
flamed at
I
the
remember.
beach. And he said this though, and I was like, yeah. And
Interesting.
he said, "What happened to all the lists?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, you used to fight with lists, and like you go down, you like hit this thing, and then your characters would do stuff. Like, what's that? And I said, "Well, this game doesn't have lists. Also, we call them menus, but that's
Menus.
menus." But he was like,
menus,
"Oh
yeah.
man, it's changed, huh?" So when the reason I bring that up is because, as simple as this battle system is at times, I love what Square Enix was trying to do, is trying to reach and expand that brand to get that mind share, get that their franchise in the hearts and minds of gamers that might not have looked twice at it. My brother looked twice at it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, even if they're saying it's COD, which is mind blowing to me, it still got his attention. And that's
did.
the
Very well
important
said.
thing.
I think a lot of us, especially everybody here in this talk show, are very much all on board with, we don't care how you're introduced to Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
We just
We just want to get you in.
appreciate that
Come
you
on,
are.
Come
Yeah.
join us.
did.
One of us.
Get you
one
in the
of us.
door, we'll bring you the rest of the way.
Yeah.
So we touched on pacing for a quick moment there, and I want to dive in this one, especially in a big way, because I think this is a similarity between the games, actually, to a certain extent. Like, both of them are very big games with lots of side quests, right? It's a big world, and you can really lose yourself in the non-story elements. I think especially actually in Rebirth, if you do all those, really everything, you're going up to like 120 hours, whereas 16, I did everything in the game. I did it on stream even, which slows things down, and I got it all done in 80 hours. So not quite as big, which makes it all the more surprising, in my opinion, even though both get their pacing complaints, especially with 7 Rebirth from the audience that thinks, why are there so many mini games? Why are you forcing these mini games on me? And then the pacing arguments with 16 is that the side quests weren't as well told or weren't as interesting as the main story. So throwing all these check marks at us that we feel obligated to do before moving on because, hey, we might miss something, destroys potentially the pacing, especially with how verbose some of those side quests will be. So I guess what I'm asking is, why do we think they're being treated differently in the pacing complaints that I'm seeing between the two of them? Why is pacing in general so often talked about now, when I feel like if this wouldn't have been brought up at all back in 1997 when people spent 25, 30, 50 hours trying to figure out how to breed chocobos, ridiculous stuff like that completely destroys the pacing of the story. If you spend a lot of time on that, it's your choice, of course, but it's also your choice to do side quests in general. Like, why was this not a thing back then? Like, what has changed? Have we changed? Has gaming changed? Have the games changed? Like, what has changed
I
that
think
has made
it's-
pacing such like a big point of conversation nowadays.
I think it's both, and I think Jedi Piggy in chat hit the nail on the head, which is short attention spans. And I think it's a big reason why short form content has taken off the way it has. Like, look at TikTok or YouTube shorts versus long form content. You know, like, people are more likely to stick around in a live Twitch stream for maybe an hour versus the entire stream, which could be 4 to 6 hours. You know,
Sure.
it's just how it is. And I think I'm going to talk about 16's pacing as far as the side quests go. And as far as the side quests in the Rebirth go, you know, we talked about the character development and how like your bonds can grow stronger with your friends and all that, you know, if
Yeah.
you do certain side quests. And 16 for me personally felt like I would break the story to go do a side quest. And obviously this isn't a spoiler because it was the silliest side quest in the world to me. The icon of fire, had to go fetch some garlic from the market. And I was like, wait a minute.
Don't forget the manure you had to go get too.
Yeah, I'm like, you can't
Yeah.
go have like old Billy Bob over there go get your garlic for. Do you know how I am? I am Ifrit, and I was just kind of like, this doesn't help pacing. Whereas, like, there was no
Yeah.
meaning in it for the main character himself. There was no development for the person that you were controlling and the story that you were following.
I think they were going for this idea of like Clive, like he's not feeling too big for his britches. Like, no, I don't care how
Man of the
powerful I get.
people.
I'm still going to help out the little guy. And I like that about Clive. I love Clive as a character. I think he's a great character. But from a gameplay perspective and storytelling perspective, there's a suspension of disbelief there as well. It's like, isn't there something better for him to do?
Right.
Like, let's utilize this guy in a more meaningful way because this is not what he should be doing.
I have another thought as to what potentially makes pacing feel worse. Um, the visuality of seeing your quests and seeing 25 exclamation points on your map gives you this, oh, I need to go and do this. And then you spend 3 hours doing it. Whereas in the older games, what did you have for a quest marker?
Nothing. You stumbled
Nothing.
upon it
Yeah.
So
organically.
if you happen to just play through the game and you stop to do a quest, you're like, oh, cool, I got a quest. But you just carried on going. It was still the story. You didn't sit there and go, oh, I've still got another 15 quests to do. That wasn't it.
Yeah.
And so I
What if
think the
it's not available
realization of
later?
it,
I got to do it now.
Mhm.
yeah. Whereas if you don't know, you don't care. You just keep playing. And then eventually when you go to replay it, you might go, oh, I wonder if there's more to do.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And there will be people that stop and speak to everyone. Great. I'm not one of those people. I'm someone that I will play through the game, speak to a character that appeals to me. If someone stands out, I hear them talking, I see a text by, something like that. Something makes me talk to them. But seeing a quest marker, like it baffles me because it just sits there and goes,
Yeah.
why am I being led to every single quest? It's
Hmm.
what I don't like in 14. It's so long, it's so arduous. I don't want that. I want my story
Yeah.
with side quests.
Noctis was the smart one here. He knew what to do.
The UI ruins it, to be perfectly
Mhm.
honest.
Yeah.
We feed on discoverability in games, and we've turned quest lines into deliveries. And anytime you're just like a delivery guy, my chat has sometimes called him DoorDash Clive because that's what it feels like,
Yeah.
running back and forth, right? But to discover that, it's like, oh, I'm doing something that I could have missed, and that is inherently interesting. There's a there's a Florida State professor by the name of John Keller, and he actually has done a great deal of research on what makes something interesting. Briefly, something has to be able to hold your attention by doing something surprising that you didn't think was going to happen. Number two, it has to have relevance to a larger scope of your life, perhaps. Number three, it has to be challenging to your confidence, but you still have to be able to think that you are able to overcome it. And then finally, rewards give you satisfaction. I think that 16 is kind of middling on all four of these. The quests are largely the same. You go here, you
Mhm.
do this thing, talk to this person, kill this
Yeah.
thing, and then you return, right? The relevance, like you said, Shoop, you're the freaking icon of fire.
Yeah.
Why are you delivering me? Right. And so there's a relevance that you have to kind of suspend. Confidence wise, this is where it really, really comes like 16 wins in confidence because it's like some of these battles are really challenging,
Mhm.
especially some of like the bounties or whatever. And then the rewards for me, they didn't do it.
Oh
There
no, they
was
do not.
nothing that was really satisfying about this. Maybe some what was it, like some kind of upgrade material maybe, but usually it was like tarnished ash or something.
Yep.
Something that you can
um
find just laying around
yeah,
anywhere.
Yep.
laying
Then
on the
you have
ground, it's
you
like,
literally have
oh, more of that.
thousands of it by the end. You're like, what do I do with all
Yeah,
this tarnished ash? Like, who gives a crap?
Hey, look, I'm the
yeah,
one that made the mistake of like selling all of this crap because I was like, I don't know what to do with
Yeah.
this. I don't want to get all the
yeah,
orchestrion
totally.
scrolls, and then I needed some of it later.
To bridge off of that point, Noctis, I like what you're saying there. I think what's also not just like what you received as rewards for side quests, but and also ignoring the story elements even of what
Right.
the side quests in Seven Rebirth did. What was great and really encouraged me to want to do side quests in Seven Rebirth is it all felt cohesive. Everything fit together in such a way where doing this is going to help me do that. Doing this is going to give
Hmm.
me material so I can use the mixing and make these items and make new items and get new on the list. Like everything all worked together. If I find all the crystals, then the icon battle or the summon battle will be easier and that'll give me the summon. Like everything
Hmm.
kind of worked together. If I do the life springs, then I'm going to learn about the region. And I loved learning about the region.
Yep.
You know,
The rewards are so good in Rebirth for that,
right.
and there's
It leads you around
consequences.
the world and makes you want to
Yeah.
explore it. And I personally love the tower system. Actually, I know it's like Ubisoft tower system, but it allows you to be like, you know what, I'm not going to go to the tower, I'm going to just
Hmm.
run around, because if I go to the tower it's going to reveal everything. But if I just run around, I'm
Hmm.
going to find an owl and it's going to lead me to a life spring, or I'm going to find a crystal that's going to lead me to the next crystal and it's going to lead me to where I can power up or power down the summon so I can beat it more easily. There was emergent gameplay in that
Yeah.
way. There was discoverability. And that's why for me, my favorite region at the beginning was actually the grasslands for a while, because when I did the grasslands, I did not go to any towers. I just was like, I
Yeah.
just want to make every
Just
little
ran.
part of this map not gray.
Right.
That's my goal here. And in doing that, I found all these things. And also the world building and the storytelling in the
Hmm.
environment was so important. When you go to the region closest to Midgard and you feel how it starts to die, everything's dying, and you see those gigantic Mako pipes and the music turns
Yeah.
to hollow, like it, you know, the theme from Remake. I was like, man, there's some storytelling going on here.
Yeah.
And then if you really look at the weapons and inspect the weapons and what it's telling about the Republic of Junon and what used to be there, when you go through the Mithril mines and you realize it was this museum because they lost control of it to Shinra, and they turned it into some museum to Mithril, and then nobody upkept it, so then it just became a monster ring. So like there was all this storytelling that
The
was
rabbit
being,
hole of storytelling.
yeah, you were falling down the
Yeah.
rabbit hole of storytelling, and not because it was beating you over the head with verbose dialogue where it's like, shut up, dude, you've said enough. It was like, no, it's
Yeah.
just, it's all happening organically while I travel around this world. And that's
And the other
why
thing,
it didn't feel pacing was a negative for me. Even though there was a lot there, it never for me felt like a chore. It never felt like I was going out of my way doing something I didn't want to do. It was actually surprising where it's like, I'm not going to do this entire region. God, this is taking forever. I did the entire region. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop exploring. I loved every bit of it.
alongside some side quests, literally gave you character development. You got actual character development, actual lore, and rewards for said character development. It- I can't understate how important that is to a character team driven story.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is like I feel like a lot of Final Fantasy games over the years kind of get compared with one another, whether it be like pacing
Hmm.
or story or combat, da da da. I mean, y'all know the whole. I haven't played 13 personally myself, but you know the whole like. Sorry,
You just got to follow.
I just got to follow, and all I heard was ride the shoe puff. Thank
Also,
you
if
for
you
the
could get your
follow.
mic a little bit closer, you're just
Yeah,
kind of,
sorry.
yeah.
Thank you. Whoever just followed me, it startled me. Ride the shoe puff.
Right, Zishupuff?
Oh my
But like the
gosh.
whole 13 thing is like 13 is so linear and 13 is so linear, and something we've all kind of been talking about recently is that Final Fantasy X is extremely linear. It's one of
Oh,
my
yeah, it is.
favorite
Yeah.
games. However, you don't notice how linear it is because of the pacing and because of the story and because of the development of the characters. Fuck. Sorry, somebody just followed me again.
Look what you've done.
I need to turn
Everybody
off my
spam
alerts.
follow her right now.
But it's really about, it really is, it has to do with character development and pacing along the way. Like the game can be linear as heck, because 10 is, but you don't feel it as hard sometimes if it gives you enough substance along the way. Y'all gotta stop.
The
Thank you for the
world
follows.
structure, we talk about this a lot, but the world structure needs to service the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's why 10 works and 13 doesn't as much, because 13's narrative is about running away. It's about escape. It's about dodging the enemy. Why would you have a linear structure when it's about escaping and dodging the enemy? It makes more sense to have a very open, non-linear structure when that is the narrative. But 10's narrative is about a pilgrimage. It's literally about going from point A to point B to C to D and E and so on in order to accomplish that pilgrimage. The structure of the world needs to service the narrative.
But again, during 13's development, the developers themselves said they wanted to bring Final Fantasy again. I hate to say it again because I'm now becoming that guy into the Call of Duty era. And what is that?
They did,
It's
yeah.
linear corridors. And so they did that for 10 of the 13 chapters.
I forgot they said that.
game.
You're right. I
They
forgot
did.
that they compared it to Call of Duty. That's wild. It's like your
did.
brother all over again.
Now I know he was onto something.
He was, I guess so.
I actually didn't dislike the linearity of 13.
Me either. I like 13.
See, I'm a
Because
big 13 fan.
and this is the 12. And don't get me wrong,
haven't
I
played
am
it.
a huge 12 stan. Like I love 12.
Yeah.
And I also really like 13. But 13 for me felt somewhat refreshing because of just how open 12 was. There
Mhm.
was very little linearity in 12.
Yeah.
So I save a few points here and there. But
Yeah.
13, the linearity was a nice touch for me.
Yeah, it's that ebb and flow, right, of the franchise. Sometimes they course correct a little too hard, but they go back and forth, and they try and change
Yeah.
it up. It's one of the strengths, and to some people, some of the weaknesses of the Final Fantasy franchise. Because I think nowadays, especially, and I think we're going to talk about that now with sales. Does Final Fantasy have an identity anymore? And I think a lot of people would say it doesn't because it is changing up so often. In my opinion, that is the heart of what Final Fantasy is, but it might be hurting them nowadays. And that's why we're going to get to some sales discussion here. Let's start off with Final Fantasy XVI. It hit PlayStation 5 exclusively on June 23rd. Less than a week later, Square Enix announced that it shipped, not sold, shipped and digitally sold 3 million copies. There has been no official update on sales since. But in January 2024, they did say it was in line with their expectations. They said it was on the lower end of their expectations, but in line with their expectations. To maximize our sales of 16 over an 18-month period, we intend to roll out downloadable content and the PC version when the timing is optimal. So not devastating. It kind of feels like it might have been on like the lower end of their expectations, but they felt like we know what we need to do to get this thing legs. We're going to do DLC. We're going to do the PC release. Let's go over to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, though. With 7 Rebirth, its exact sales are yet to be announced by Square Enix. That is very unusual, especially for their crown jewel, Final Fantasy VII. We are over 3 months, I believe, out from 7 Rebirth's release, and they haven't said a peep about how this game is doing from a commercial standpoint. So a lot of speculation there on what's going on. Last month, industry analyst Daniel Ahmed claimed Rebirth had sold about half the sales of its predecessor remake, and was said to be, quote, underperforming sales-wise. That is launch aligned between the two of them. Now, analyst Matt Piscatella, he's with NPD Group and all that, although I think it was renamed to Sarkana, I believe, has offered some further context on Rebirth sales. It might be the 4th best-selling game in the US this year to date, but it's the 14th best-selling in lifetime sales of all Final Fantasy games in the US. Further, its sales are down by a double-digit percentage when compared to Remake over the same period. And even worse, it's also down on a double-digit percentage compared to 16. That's the more devastating one, because Remake is understandable to a certain point. Remake had a much bigger launch base, 100 million PS4 owners. It was the first in a series, but 16 came out almost a year before Rebirth to a smaller install base and still double-digit percentage lower on Rebirth than 16. So while one popular theory among fans is that Remake launched on PS4 to a higher install base than Rebirth on PS5, it still hasn't outsold the similarly PS5 exclusive Final Fantasy XVI. Estimated sales on Rebirth right now, well, should be more like start of May, somewhere in the 2 to 2.5 million, which in my opinion isn't devastating. I think it's probably considerably below their expectations. I think they probably wanted more like 3.5 to 4 by this point. But here's the thing. This is what we need to discuss. Like, how do they course correct here? How do they get legs out of 7 Rebirth? Is it possible, do you guys think, that we get the PC release of Rebirth before we get the PC release of 16? Let's go to Noctis first. What do you think?
I don't think we get the PC release of Rebirth
No.
before 16, personally. I think that, this game has been out for 3 months. We knew, just because of sequels and because remake was not everybody's cup of tea, and then there are others that are waiting on part 3. We knew that it was going to be lower than remake. But a clarifying question: with the sales comparison to 16, are we comparing 16 lifetime sales
Now
to
we're
the three
talking launch
months?
align. So the first 3
Yeah.
months of 16 sales versus the first 3 months of Rebirth sales. Rebirth is double digit percentage, which could be just be 10%. Let's make it clear. It doesn't mean it's
Okay.
50%. It
Yeah.
could just be 10%, but it's at least 10% below 16. Launch aligned 3 months in.
Sure. I think that in some ways it does go into that whole branding and the mind share of people's thinking. If I The other thing with Final Fantasy, let me just shift gears for a second. The other thing with Final Fantasy is I get students in my classes who have never played a Final Fantasy game before, a video game, much less. And they say, "Do I have to start with number one
Mm.
in order to play 15?" And one of the questions here is, okay, I can convince them Final Fantasy 16, you can go and play that. But with Rebirth, it's like, well, they say that you can play that and be your starting point, but really it's the sequel to this other game, and it gets a little confusing. So
Sure.
I'm curious how much that's playing into it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point for sure. I think PC wise, one thing that can be said about Rebirth coming first, something to keep in mind, is that 16 was done on a proprietary engine,
Hmm,
something that's not as easily ported PC wise. What was 7
interesting.
Rebirth developed on? Unreal Engine 4. Very easy to port.
Yeah.
I do wonder if they feel more urgency to get 7 Rebirth on the PC as soon as possible in order to, before it's left hearts and minds, before it's left the
Yeah.
conversation, or maybe they want to time it. Let's not forget, this could be a Game of the Year contender. They might want to capitalize on that. November comes around, gets nominated for Game of the Year. It's in the Game of the Year discussion. PC release. One of the best
Yeah.
reviewed games of the year. Let's remind people of that. And now you have it on PC. I'm surprised 16 isn't out yet on PC, or at least given an official release date, because it has gone past its exclusivity period, as has 7 Rebirth, by the way, as well. Rebirth only had a 3-month exclusivity period with PS5. I
Right.
believe that 16 had a 1 year. They're both right around there now. So interesting. It's also
Didn't they
interesting.
say? Did
Go
they
ahead,
say at
Noctis.
PAX during the 16 presentation that it was coming soon? Like,
They
They
I
did.
don't.
they did.
They didn't give a date or
They did
anything,
not
but
give
they
a
said
date
it
though.
is on the way. So
Yeah, it's got to be soon. It's got to be soon.
I
yeah.
think it's going to be before the end of the year for sure.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
they
It's got to be.
wouldn't, I don't think they would have brought that up at PAX if it wasn't going to be by the end of 2024. I really don't.
Yeah.
Could
I
you eventually could you potentially see next week Xbox showcase? It's not out of the question that it could release on both Xbox and PC. Could we get the announcement of the PC Xbox release next week? It's a possibility.
It's possible.
I
You
think it'd
know,
be smart.
that'd be awesome. That'd be great. More players. We got to get more players. Like we said, one of us. We got to
But
get more players in the Final Fantasy space.
but we started
Um,
this whole thing when we were talking about as far as when, Final Fantasy games did eventually come to Xbox, and it just wasn't quite the same as far as sales go. I don't think, if for some reason it is going to take more time, or if it might be more difficulty, I don't know. I don't develop games. To bring it to both PC and Xbox at the same time, they're going to put PC first.
I agree.
Hands down,
PC
they're
is
gonna
where
put
it's going
PC
to do a lot
first.
better. 7 Remake did pretty darn good on PC, actually. They got a lot of increased sales from that.
You put
Um,
Rebirth on PC, do a crossover event with 14. and like
Yep.
suddenly you are expanding your
Yeah,
horizons. 'Cause
always
a lot of
capitalize on
people
14. Yeah.
a lot of people play 14 exclusively on PC,
Yep.
Mhm.
right?
Hmm.
So that could be a new
I mean, they
avenue, I
just did
think.
the 16 event
They
with
did.
Final Fantasy 14. That could be a
It's
hint,
not on
actually.
PC, so
Yeah, we're
Right.
almost there though, but maybe that's a hint that we're just about there
could be. Yeah.
for PC, and it could also be a hint on 9 remake. We're getting 9 stuff in 14. Maybe 14 is like the telling card. It's like, oh, if it's going into 14, it must be
Mhm.
immediately on the horizon. Easily. What do you think?
I is- sorry, I kind of skipped I missed part of it before, but what I wanted to say around the sales relationship of Rebirth to 16, there are multiple factors which will always detract from Rebirth sales, and the biggest one is, as Noctis said, you can't just go, "I'm going to pick that as my first Final Fantasy, and that's the one I'm playing."
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Mm.
You'd be so lost. You wouldn't have a clue what you're doing. Whereas 16, you can go, "Yep, this is the first one." Um, and the other thing they hear, "Oh, this is a remake. This is a the game has been remade from its
Mhm.
original. Do I need to play the first one?"
Yeah. A
Um,
lot of
you've
baggage.
got it. You've got it being that half of the player base played on PS4 for remake, and maybe couldn't afford to get a PS5, maybe didn't want to get a PS5 purely for Rebirth because they don't like the other PlayStation exclusives because there are so few that are actually good. Then they don't want to. There's so many factors that restrict Rebirth sales due to the simple fact that it is a remake, a sequel on a different gen,
Right.
Yeah.
and so yeah, bring it on PC. That will solve some of the issues.
They need to get as much legs out of 7 Rebirth as possible, but I do feel like what we need to know probably is the case. We'll never get another remake trilogy again like this. This
That
was a once
that's
in a lifetime thing. You're never going to see anything like this to this scale probably ever
mhm,
again, especially from Square Enix, but I think maybe from anybody. Like
Mm.
this is truly a special thing that we got, and I think we need to
Yeah.
appreciate that. This is a really really special thing that we received from Square Enix. They did not need to turn into 3 parts. They did not need to go as hard as they did, and unfortunately it's not, I don't think, overall working out the way they wanted it to. I don't think it's going to be like a devastating thing where it, hurts them in the long run, but I do think it could inform their decisions moving forward. Um, I think we don't see 3-part trilogies again. If they do 10, they're not going to make it a 3-part trilogy. They're going to make it one game.
I don't
You know what I
want, if
mean?
they remake any other of my Final Fantasy favorites, 9 or 10, I don't want trilogies. I don't want multiple parts. I
mm-mm,
want just straight
no,
up game.
one game.
And it doesn't have to be wildly extravagant. It doesn't have to be broken down into 8 separate years of waiting.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank
There
you.
was one point that I thought would really drive their sales, and in a big way, and it always comes down to their marketing. Um, if they actually market the remake and rebirth combo package really well on PC, on Xbox, on Switch, on PS5, on PS4, well, not PS4 because they're not going to downgrade, but if they put it on all of these and they say, buy them together at this discounted rate or buy them together at the cost of Rebirth alone, and we want you to market, we're going to sell this, we're going to market it, we're going to put it everywhere, we're going to put adverts, we're going to put it on billboards, we're going to tell you, buy them together, learn this game, play this game, do what you want with the game, but buy it. And I think that is the biggest way they will increase their sales because they're
Mhm.
saying, we know that it's in 2 games. We know that we release them separately by 4 years, but here's them together so that you can experience them together.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I have one last final question in this segment for you guys. Something that we've seen a lot with Final Fantasy series is the fan base isn't kind to it sometimes at the start, and then the future can sometimes change things, and suddenly people come around. The fan base suddenly becomes like, oh no, I've always loved this one. Like, what are you talking about? I feel like 13 actually went through a little bit of that, in my opinion. 13 was so hated when it first came out, and don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of haters on 13, but I do feel like there's definitely a growing fan base that's like, you know what, this one's a lot better than I gave it credit for back then. How do we think the future will be kind or unkind to the 7 remake trilogy, and more specifically actually to 16? Because there's definitely a discussion, a conversation from the moment 16 released. Shoot brought it up earlier that this is not Final Fantasy, not my Final Fantasy. This is not what I want Final Fantasy to be moving forward. A lot of that stuff going on. I'm curious what we think 5 years from now people are going to be saying about Final Fantasy 16.
I don't know about 5 years from now, but I can tell you 10 years from
Okay,
now.
10 years from now.
I feel like every Final Fantasy hits this strange window. And I've talked about this with somebody else too, and she's very adamant on this stance of like every Final Fantasy hits like around a decade or 15 years of age, and all of a sudden it's like, God, the nostalgia, the remember how great it was wonderful. And I feel like I will die on the Final Fantasy IX hill. I loved 9 as a kid. I love 9 as an adult. And it was only as an adult that I don't hear people being like, "Ugh, it's so cartoony. It's just, I can't take it serious." Now everybody's like, 9 is the love letter to the series. It's the greatest. It's Sakaguchi's baby. It's the greatest Final Fantasy of its time. And I'm like, where were y'all in 2000 when I was playing it in my living room floor and you guys were making fun of me because there were no Buster Swords or cool guys with like yellow spiky hair? There was no Midgar. I think 16 is going to have the same experience that every Final Fantasy has as it ages, which is people are going to remember where they were when they first played it. People are going to remember how iconic it was to see, like, graphically, it was the coolest thing for me because I had never played anything else on a next-gen console. So I know I'm going to remember 10 years from now being like, God, remember that one icon fight or this and that and this and that. And I think there's a lot more criticism of any game upon release in the first year or two versus 10 years later when you look back and say, you know what, this was good. They did this well.
And to be fair, this isn't exclusive to the Final Fantasy franchise. It's not like this is the only fan base that does this. Zelda is very infamous for this, in my opinion, where people turn around on games over time.
Yep.
But thank you for the follow, by the way. That just came in. We have anonymous follow, so feel free to alert.
Yeah, bombard him with follow alerts. Not
It's
me.
a life cycle of Final Fantasy, says Taser. Yeah. Appreciate all the follows that came in tonight, you guys. Actually, subtext, you are in chat, so thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. All right. Any before we move on from this topic and take a commercial break, any final words on this Final Fantasy VII Rebirth versus Final Fantasy 16 discussion? Noctis?
I'll say this. I think that 16 will be remembered for its incredible performances. For many people, I think it will be
Mm-hmm.
the game that they say, that's where I was introduced to Ben Starr, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I've got to go back and check that one out. And they'll see the amazing things that he was able to do in the game and then fall in love with the story and the characters. I would still say that some of the most potent emotional moments in Final Fantasy are in 16.
Yep.
The story of Clive facing, his past. I think
Accepting
the
the
ending
truth.
sequence, all of these things are quintessential Final Fantasy moments that I think will only age well. Rebirth, I think that we are going to get, once part 3 is done, so we're
Mm-hmm.
talking 2027, 2028, I think that people will look back and say that trilogy of games is something truly special. It was a once in a lifetime sort of thing. There is no game series that attempted to do something quite like that. Even God of War and God of War Ragnarok. These two games just do not have the scope that this series does. This is our Lord of the Rings. This is gaming Star Wars because it is one story across 3 different installments, and it is a long game for them.
Yeah.
I will also say that with Rebirth, there will come a day, I believe, when people say that game truly had something for everyone. If you like Rocket
Mhm.
League, boy, do I have a soccer Red 13 game for you, right?
It is.
Like,
Yeah.
there's something that everybody can say, hey, that was for me, as well as a lot of things that wasn't. And
Yeah.
I think that'll be a beautiful thing. But it's all got to be released.
It's an amazing point, and I do think the caveat to that too is that they got to stick the landing, right? I
Mhm.
think that right now a lot of people are a little bit pessimistic, let's say, right, based off of maybe the way that remake ended or the way that Rebirth ended. But if it all comes together cohesively, and it feels like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, they had a plan the whole time with the way Return ends, then suddenly we're going to look back at it all and be like, oh shit, like this was all in the context of it together. This was all a masterpiece, but they got to stick to landing. So we got to wait to see what happens there. Easily. Any comments?
I am somebody that will shout praises over the remake series, and forever, because that series of games took me through COVID, and then took me through what has been a potentially horrific year for me personally. That game really gave me this desire and hope to keep pushing and driving, and I would implore anyone that hasn't played that to bite the bullet and try them. I really, really would. They are emotional roller coasters, which are phenomenal games, and do not take anyone else's reviews of 16 or remake or rebirth as gospel. They are your games to play, not anyone else's. I personally am not the biggest fan of 16, and I'm going to replay it off stream and see if I enjoy it more. However, just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you won't. You might love it.
Great discussion, you guys. Let's take a little break. When we come back, it's one of our favorite segments in the show. We're going to play a little bit of Final Fantasy Jeopardy. And you guys can play in chat as well, because our contestants here are not going to be looking at chat. Am I right?
We're not allowed to look at chat.
We're not allowed to look at chat. Play along as well. I also want to say before we head out the commercial break that make sure you take advantage of the Twitch channel pay redemptions, you guys. You can give experience points 100, 200, and 300. You can use all three of them. Provide experience points to either myself, Shoop, or Easily. It's a little mini game.
Easily doesn't need any more.
Every episode. Yes, Easily's always in the lead. Look at him. He's at 1,500. What the hell's going on?
No.
I got 400.
No. We need to keep it this way, okay? Okay, there's a reason. There's a reason. Okay? We need somebody to carry the late game fights in our travels, and that will be me, okay? That will be me. I will make sure we win.
Thank you, Amy, for giving me experience.
We also have 6 letters in the Moogle mailbox, which is something we're going to dip into for a little bit at the end of the show and see what you guys have to ask of us. Maybe we'll have some good topics of discussion. Feel free to use the Twitch channel Play Redemptions and throw your letter into the mailbox as well. But please make it Final Fantasy focused, and please make sure it's something that we didn't already touch on, something that might bring in a new topic of conversation, something fresh for this evening. But right now, let's take probably about 5 minutes, honestly, you guys, because we're going to take a bathroom break. We're probably going to get a drink. We're going to set up Play Factal. We've been talking for almost 3 hours now. So yeah, please, I hope you guys hold on tight. Enjoy the music if you're a sub, and apologies for the ads if you're not. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Crystal Bearers, a Final Fantasy podcast. This is episode 7. And we're so happy to have you all here. We're joined tonight once again by Easily 18, Raizi Shupov, and special guest Professor Noctis, Prof Noctis, as they're called on Twitch. You can see all their names below their faces, their beautiful faces right now. So please, once again, I implore you, give all of our contestants, Jeopardy contestants, a follow. And also Professor Noctis, make sure you search them on YouTube, because they have amazing video essays about Final Fantasy. They are literally a professor of Final Fantasy, pretty much. I'm just going to call you Professor of Final Fantasy. A lot of good Final Fantasy 15 stuff, of course, with a name like Professor Noctis, but also a lot of great 7 Remake and Rebirth stuff to check out if you are more looking for that kind of thing. Right now, we are about to jump into one of our favorite segments, you guys. Let's get into a little bit of Final Fantasy Jeopardy!
And we are not allowed to look at chat, just so you guys know.
No looking at chat. All right, welcome contestants. How we doing? You guys ready for general Final Fantasy knowledge?
This is my favorite part of Crystal Bearers is Jeopardy. This is my favorite thing.
Crystal Bears. So let me go through our topics tonight, our categories, I should say. Let me make this a little bigger for you guys too. Just in case you can't read.
Rose, you're in charge. Easily and I can't moderate anything currently.
How about that? Is that a little better for you guys? Make it a little bigger so you guys can see a little better. I'll drag this down too, like that, just to make it a little bigger for you guys. All right, so our categories tonight: surnames. Very easy, very simple. I'm going to give you a first name of a Final Fantasy character. You gotta tell me the last name.
Oh my
Easy.
goodness.
It means Final Fantasy X probably won't be in that category.
No, Final Fantasy X will not be in that category. No. And I quote once again, super easy. I'm gonna read off classic, not so often classic, but a Final Fantasy quote. Some of them are more obscure, of course. All you gotta do is tell me the character who said that quote. Who am I? This one is a little bit important for you to know, to close your eyes when you click on one of the, or when you tell me to do one of these, because there's gonna be 4 bullet points for each who am I. And I don't want you guys jumping down to the final bullet point, because each bullet point gives a little bit more information about that character that you are going to try and figure out who they are. So when you guys do that, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I will read off the bullet points one by one. You can buzz in, get your finger over the buzzer, and make sure you're ready to buzz in, of course, but I will read them off one as you close your eyes. Blurred backgrounds. Bringing back a classic here. We're going to take a classic pre-rendered background from the glory days of Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, 10. Those pre-rendered backgrounds. I'm going to blur the hell out of them. But there will be one element of each pre-rendered background that is not blurred. Give you guys a little hint with that.
So do we have to give you the location?
The location in that Final Fantasy and the location that pre-rendered background was in.
Okay.
And then finally, potpourri. It's a mixture. It's a melting pot. It's a little bit of everything. You never know what you're going to get in potpourri. All right. Since we have a very special guest here, I feel like we should give control to Professor Noctis.
Oh my gosh.
So you get to lead us here. Where do you want to go, Noctis?
Why am I so nervous all of a sudden? You have just hyped this up. And I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. I make my students play this game for their final exam reviews, and all of a sudden I feel their pain. So, okay. Let's do surnames for 300.
For 300. First name is Kefka. And Moogle goes first. That's Noctis.
Palazzo.
Palazzo is correct. Off to a good start. Off to a very good start. 300 on the board. Gil for Noctis, and he remains in control. Go ahead.
Oh, surnames for 200.
Surnames for 200. The first name is Cypher. We got Shoop.
Almasi.
Who knows how we pronounce these things, but you're close. You know, we're just going to go with it.
That's
as long
how
as
I've
you
always
get close,
pronounced it.
if you're in the range, I'm going to give it to you. Almasi is right, and Shoop has taken control. Now has 200. Gil.
Let's do surnames for 100.
Surnames for 100. The first name is Jesse from Final Fantasy VII. Prof. Noctis.
Raspberry.
Raspberry is correct. Jesse Raspberry. Noctis back in control. Where you want to go?
Surnames 400.
Surnames 400. The first name is Rosa from Final Fantasy IV.
Oh, no. That's my girl. Oh, no.
Clearly not.
Oh, hold on. I want to open up this on my other screen so I have the answers so I can see them myself. I want to make sure I don't get anything wrong.
Noctis and I are like dying at the moment.
I know her name.
Me too.
Oh.
Do you though?
Yeah, I know.
That's not my name. That's not my
All
name.
right, I got to move on, you guys. It's 30 seconds are up. The answer is Farrell.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, that.
No, you didn't know it.
I kept
you were
thinking
wrong.
Ferris. And I was like,
No.
is it Ferris?
Well,
No.
since nobody got it, Noctis, you remain in control.
Okay, 500.
Oh God, hold on a sec.
Surname.
I'm trying to open up on the side just so I have all the answers. Okay. Surnames for 500. The first name is Galif from Final Fantasy V.
Noctis, I'm looking at you.
You know what I mean.
Come on. He's such a great character, though.
This is not fair.
So what we discussed during commercial break is that Noctis's 2 least favorite Final Fantasies are 9 and 5, which are like almost top of the list for Shoop, which is very amusing, actually.
They're both in my top 3. I think it's funny.
9 is better than 5.
I will say Taserface got in chat. It is Baldesian.
I've never gotten
No, me neither.
Never
I
really
love
gotten
that
it?
game.
You sure?
No idea.
For some reason, I remembered that one. I think I remembered it because of when we did the character tournament.
I wouldn't want to remember if my last name was Bald Legion either.
Bald Legion. All right. I see you. Making fun of Galif now. Making fun of an old man like that.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. You're still in control, Noctis. You can go wherever you want.
Man, okay. Blurred backgrounds for 200.
For 200, here's the background. You got to tell me the game and where it is. Easily got it first. What is it?
It's in Final Fantasy VIII and is in Dalit.
I'll take Dalet. I say Dale.
It's on the like
No,
strip where there's a
Dale-
little bit
Dale.
I was just joking around because of the pronunciation. I say Dale. But good job. Good job. Easily on the board with 200. This is a
Were
close
those
match. You guys
Buster
are-
swords in that picture?
It's a great question.
Wait,
Should I
was
go back to it? I don't think I can.
They were selling Buster swords in that store?
Damn, now I feel like I got to go back and look.
Can you go back?
I can't. I can't. Won't let me
That
click
was
on it anymore.
crazy. That was awesome.
Well, now I got to inspect that. Easily, you're in
never
control.
noticed
Very
that.
possible. Blurred backgrounds 100, please.
Blurred backgrounds for 100. Here you go. Professor Noctis.
That's Final Fantasy VII, and it's in the City of the Ancients.
Yep, that's
I
fine.
can't believe
Forgotten
you
City.
did that to us, Struggle.
City of the Ancients either is acceptable. There you go.
Why would you do
Forgotten
that to us?
I didn't say what happens there. And Professor Noctis is back in control. Where you want to go, Noct?
Who am I for 300?
Close your eyes. Make sure your mouth
Hover
is
over
over
the
the
buzzer.
buzzer. Did you say
Over
100?
the buzzer. Okay. I
100?
said 300.
300. All right, here we go. Who am
Okay,
I
shut
for
my eyes.
300? The first bullet point. My presence in the game was not to build the main narrative, but to grow the world. I appear blonde in my game, but my original artwork shows green hair. Shoop buzzed in first.
Tara.
You got it backwards. It's now her hair is green in the game. Incorrect. Noctis buzzed in two though.
I know who it is now.
Well, I don't want to go anymore.
I had a feeling that was gonna trick you guys. It's the opposite.
I think I know who it is now.
All right, that I have to hit the X on this one. Knocked. I'll keep reading. I lost my mother and was abandoned by my father at a young age. My main strength is that I can mimic the behavior of monsters and enemies. Easily, do you want to take a shot before the others guess?
Mimic the abilities, did you
Yes.
say?
Mimics the
Is it
abilities of
Quistis?
monsters and enemies.
Would it be Quistis?
No. I'm not going to dock you points though. We're way past the timer. What
No, I
about you
don't think I
guys?
know
Do you
how
feel
to.
like you know who it is now? Knocked? Shoot.
I have another guess, maybe.
It won't count, but I'll allow you to guess.
Okay. Is it Realm?
It is not Realm, no.
Am I allowed to guess even though it won't count?
Chat is blowing up and they know exactly who
Is
it is.
it Rydia?
No.
How
It is Gao from Final Fantasy VI.
I wouldn't have got that anyway.
I haven't played Final Fantasy VI. Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute.
All right.
Wait,
Well-
he's blonde in the artwork. Is that right? But green in the game?
He is the opposite, actually.
See, that's where I was messing up. I kept
No,
in my
he's-
head.
That dude's definitely got green hair in the game, right?
Rydia has green hair in the game too, and she lost her mom at a young age.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're
You got
still
me-
you're still in control, Noct. You're still in control.
Oh, me still? Okay.
You're still in the lead.
Fine.
You're still in the lead. Well, actually, you're
Well,
tied with
let's-
easily. Sorry.
Let's go to and I quote for 400.
400. Here's the quote. You were always such a stiff, but that's what I like about you. Shoop.
Oh, I don't think I should have buzzed in. Hold on.
You have 17 seconds.
God, I don't know.
You guys can buzz in too. You can still buzz in.
Chapu. It's so wrong.
It is not Chapu. No.
So wrong.
Easily. You want to try?
Is it Jacked?
It is Jekt.
I knew it was from 10.
Wow.
And it's kind of similar to a quote that Chapu like says kind
Easily
of
in the lead and in control. Where you want to go, Easily?
Blurred backgrounds for 300, please.
Here's the background. Shoop.
It's Final Fantasy X. It's the Bavel like prison.
Yes. The Vel prison of Final
Mm.
Fantasy X. Almost
I
out of
love
the
how you
negative.
blurred the characters.
Yeah.
Of course I blurred the characters. I can't give it away. Shoop, you're in control.
I have to make up for getting a 10 question wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I quote for 100.
And I quote for 100. Here's the quote. I found him with his nose buried in my nuts. Shoop,
I
you're
found
first.
him with my nose buried in his nuts. It's Harpocrates
From which one?
from Final Fantasy 16.
That's right.
He was talking about
Harpocrates.
Torgal, just
I
so you
found
guys
him
know.
with his nose
Talking about the
buried in my
dog.
nuts.
Spoilers. Let people wonder.
Shoop, you're in control.
I want to see what potpourri's all about. Dude, give me potpourri for 100.
Poopery for 100. The Magus sisters are best known as an Aeon in Final Fantasy X, but they made their start as bosses in this Final Fantasy. Shoop.
Final Fantasy IV.
It is Final Fantasy IV. And you are no longer in the negative.
Yay.
Where do you want to go, Shoop?
I'm no longer in debt. Potpourri for 200.
Potpourri for 200. Final Fantasy VII OG's opening boss, Guard Scorpion, was renamed to this in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Noctis.
Scorpion Sentinel.
That is correct. Scorpion Sentinel. You're in control.
Potpourri for 400.
This flower, which adorns Yuna's skirt, bracelet, and hair accessory, is more open at night than during the day, something that represents Yuna well. Shoop.
It's also her name meeting. It's a hibiscus.
It's a hibiscus. That is correct. Big win there for Shoop and in control.
Give me more 10 questions. I don't know. Let's do the close the eye game. Let's do who am I for 100.
Who am I for
Oh,
100?
man.
Everybody close your eyes. Mouse over the buzzer. Here we go. Most people don't know my real name since I was unable to pronounce it myself when I was younger. I am 1 year older than my sister, who I was often tasked with putting to sleep. My musical theme is widely considered to be Pirates Ahoy. I keep many secrets, including my caring side and my gender. Shoop.
Ferris.
It is Ferris.
There's my Ferris.
Oh, that's their last name. Wow.
Never
Never knew.
There you
The
go.
professor is getting schooled tonight.
All right, Shoop, you're still in control, and you're almost in the lead. Coming up here.
I want to get rid of this category, so let's go blurred backgrounds for 400.
Here's the background. Easily gets in first.
Final Fantasy VII, it's Hojo's lab, the upstairs bit where Red would be.
Mojo's lab is good enough for me. Shinra headquarters, laboratory, Final Fantasy VII. Good job, Easily. You're up to 1,000 gil now and in control.
Wow. We'll finish off backgrounds, please.
Here we go. Final one. Shoop was fast. Shoop.
Final Fantasy IX South Gate.
Okay, I actually want you to...
It's the cable car station.
Do you know the name of the station?
Are you serious? There's like oh my god. Bowden Station?
No, I'm going
It's
to give
not
it to you
the-
anyway, but this can be an education for you. Shoop.
It's the Southgate Station. It's between Trino and Alexandria. This is an
Yeah,
Alexandria
you know what it is.
station.
It's fine. It's actually called Summit Station.
The Summit
Because it's at the summit of the mountain.
That works.
The more you know.
More you know.
I'm giving Shoop an
They
education. on
have
Final Fantasy
amazing
IX
bunt
tonight.
cakes.
Her favorite game of all time. For shame. Shoop, you're in control.
I don't know. And I quote for 200.
Here's the quote. I'm a coward who cannot even defy orders he knows he ought not follow. Shoop.
I want to say it's Irvine from Final Fantasy VIII.
No, incorrect.
Ooh.
But we got Noctis.
Final Fantasy IV Cecil.
That is correct. It
Oh,
is
you're a
Cecil.
Cecil guy. I'm a
Cecil,
Cecil
Cecil.
person.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh.
We got a Cecil guy.
I've never met a Cecil, but I've known several Cecils.
Oh, wow.
Noct, you're back in control, making your way back. Where do you want to go?
And I quote for 5.
Here we go. The quote is a veritable emergency of terrible urgency.
I know this.
You got to get it
'Cause
right.
It's probably one of your 2 games.
Probably. Wait, no.
Anybody want to take a shot? All right. It would have been tricky even if you went for it, because if nobody's going to buzz in, it's between 2 characters that are very similar. The one it is, though, is Zorn. I was curious if somebody was going to buzz in and say Thorn.
I knew it wouldn't be
Yeah,
Thorn
that
because
makes
Thorn
sense.
would say it all backwards.
Yeah,
You are
Thorn
hyping
is
the
like
9
Yoda.
remake, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah, Thorn is
He
the
is
Yoda
too.
one.
All right, nobody loses any gil there. It's very smart of you. I think Noctis, I think you're still in control then, right?
Potpourri for 5.
Potpourri for 5. This is the number of junctionable GFs in Final Fantasy VIII that appear in no other single-player mainline Final Fantasy title. I will give you more than 30 seconds on this one because I'm going to let you guys really brainstorm this. This is the number of junctionable GFs in Final Fantasy VIII that appear in no other single-player mainline Final Fantasy title.
Do they?
Appear?
Appear.
Do you also mean that as like?
That
Not
means not
just-
Final Fantasy 14.
But I mean, like, not at all, or just not as summons?
Honestly, I'm pretty sure it's appear in general.
Okay.
I tried to do my research on this one. I hope I'm right.
Okay.
Wait. Hold on.
Does anyone want to take a shot? You don't have to take a shot. We can just,
I got to count. Hold
just
on.
learn from this. Oh, Easily wants to go for it. Easily wants to go
Is it
for it.
7?
You're really close, Easily. That's not what I have. We'll find it. Let's see.
I think I've missed one.
Maybe.
Ah,
Sean in chat. Let's go. Shoop, you want to go for it?
I think it's 8.
It is 8. Here we
Yeah.
go. And here's why.
it was the 8th I missed.
Quetzalcoatl, Siren,
Cerberus is
Brothers,
who I missed.
Diablo,
Yeah, I had Siren.
Pandemona, Cerberus, Doomtrain, Eden. Nice job, Shoop. Very nice job.
Hang on. I have
Hang on.
questions.
Okay,
That's
might
why
be
I was
correct.
asking
Go
about
ahead. I will
Tonberry Cactuar.
remove this question if it's not correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
Jumbo Cactor and Tombury King aren't summoned
Or
on
Tonberry and a Cactuar.
summons. Yeah, but then the Jumbo and the King are not summons in any other.
But don't.
I didn't say summons. I said appear first off, but Cactuars and
right.
Tonberry.
That's why I was trying to figure out just as summons or just appear
That's
at
true.
all.
Diabolos is summonable in 6.
Right. Quetzalcoatl is in 15
Is it?
as a boss fight.
Yeah, and 16 as a boss.
Yeah.
It's spelled differently in 16.
Yeah,
And
So
it's
it was,
not. It's not
Rebirth.
Quetzalcoatl. I mean, it's like a.
It's in
But he's
Rebirth.
We
definitely
already
in
said
15.
we already said 14 doesn't count because obviously like all of everything's in 14.
Ketz is in Rebirth.
Again, it's just a monster though. It's not Quetzalcoatl.
You've just said if they appear.
He's in 15 though, as a boss.
Does he
Spelled
look
the
like?
same
Does
way.
he look like the same Quetzalcoatl? I don't remember.
but then 16 Quetzalcoatl appears. It's just like a bird-like creature.
Also,
It's not
it's just
really.
a
Quetzalcoatl is-
bird.
Also, yeah, it's in 15. He's a bird. He's in the or she's in the it's Stylef Grove. It's the boss of that area where RNA is in your party in 15.
I don't even remember.
I know.
It's been a
Yeah.
while since I played
A
15.
lot of people haven't played 15. Yeah.
Not to the extent that you have.
But anyway, I
Myth-
mean, I'm just
So should we give Easily the points for the 7?
Set things back to the way they were. That's fine. It was a fun discussion.
Cerberus also appears in 15. We should say.
Wow, 15's got everything.
Appears. I know, underrated.
Cerberus, I'm sure, is in more than that as well.
I knew Siren Brothers,
Myth-
Pandemona, Doomtrain, and Eden for sure. I
Uh,
wasn't
according
sure
to-
about
uh,
Diablo.
According to
Siren's
Myth,
in
Siren's in
6.
6.
Siren's
Yeah, I-
in
Siren
six?
is Siren is in 6. The only yeah. And
I
if
just
you
played
take
six.
out
Was this
14, then you've got Brothers and you've got Eden. And Pandemona, I don't know.
You got
Doomtrain-
Pandemonium.
Yeah, Pandemonium, but that's a place, I guess.
Right.
And I guess Doomtrain isn't Phantom Train.
No,
It's not
yeah, I
Phantom
wouldn't
Can
say
you
that.
suplex it?
Again, yeah. All right, we reset the question.
We're gonna
Anyway,
we're gonna
it was
nick
a fun.
this
It was a fun
question.
discussion. All right, Shoop. Since you answered, it,
Let's finish out and I quote for 300.
and I quote for 300.
Oh goodness.
Psst, psst. Do your best, even if you don't stand out. Shoop.
Is it selfie?
No, it's not selfie.
I need to stop buzzing in things I don't actually know for sure.
10 seconds if anybody wants to try. Easley's going for it.
Is it Headmaster Sid?
It is.
From 8?
It is. And who does
I
he
knew
say
it was
to?
8.
Who does he say it to?
Yeah.
He says it to it's the third guy, isn't it?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
says it to
it's the third guy after
to
the
the
seed
NPC.
exam.
Yep, Nita.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Easily with a pretty big lead now, but there's still, let's see, there's still 1,100 gil on the board. This is anybody's game. Easily, where do you want to go? Actually, more than that.
Potpourri.
Actually, there's 1,400 on the board.
We'll take the
Potpourri
last
for
potpourri.
300. Here we go.
Mm.
This furry walrus-like monster with great big tusks can be found in the ice cavern of Final Fantasy IX. Shoop!
Sea lion. Or no. Wait. Yeah, sea lion has tusks. He's not really a walrus-like
That's not the
monster.
answer.
No, that's not
Are
the
you
answer.
talking about the? I mean, the other one. Am I allowed to say the other thing that has great big
I
tusks?
mean,
That's also
do
found.
we want to let Shoop correct herself?
We could say it would negate the loss.
I just feel like there's two things in Ice Cavern that has big tusks. It could
There
look
are.
like a walrus.
I know you're right, and it does have big tusks, but I wouldn't call it a furry walrus-like monster.
Because if you don't want to answer it, I will. I have the answer.
I know you know the answer. I mean, am I allowed to
I do
guess the
not.
other one?
I mean, you give it away if you guess.
Well, so then I don't know if I'm allowed to guess then.
Do you want me to guess, and if I get it wrong?
Well, Easily
Um,
didn't buzz in, technically.
There you go. I have now.
But if the time limit was up, you guys are twisting the rules here.
What rule?
I'm sorry, Shoop. I think we have to give you the hex on this one.
Tisk.
And Easily, you
Am
were
I
like
okay to
you didn't
answer?
buzz, but you can answer yes.
It's a weird.
It is a weird.
It's a weird yes.
It's spelled weird too.
But since you didn't buzz
Or
in,
why
I'm
red?
just gonna.
Why
I'm happy to not have the points. Just
Well, I
'cause I
was
should have
like,
buzzed.
as soon as I said sea lion, I was like, wait a second, the weird has a tusk too, but I wouldn't say he looks like a walrus.
All right,
Oh.
still 1100 on the board. Still anybody's game, and Easily will let you have control.
We'll build up to it. The 200, please.
All right.
Close your eyes.
There
Oh.
we go. While all other party members' menu portrait face left, mine faces right. I wear eyeglasses for the early hours of my game and then suddenly never again. I was considered a child prodigy, but I don't want to be treated differently. I am the oldest character of the main party. Shoop.
Please let me get this right. Is it Tella?
No.
Tella?
You went to the one other one that has glasses. There's literally like only two. There's like barely any characters in Final Fantasy that wear glasses. Like it's very, very few. And you went with Tella. It's not Tella. I'm sorry.
And also, I know that it's also pronounced Tella, not Tala. I
I'm
just
gonna
make
say
fun of
Tala
Drew
to the
because he
day I
always
die.
says Tala.
Nobody. It is Quistis.
Oh yeah, she does have glasses at the start, and then
Yep.
she just doesn't have them.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just
I
disappear.
did. Yeah.
They just
I
disappear.
never realized her portrait's backwards though.
She's the only one that faces the other way. Yeah.
I never realized.
I couldn't
Mm.
think of like what Tella looked like in his portrait. I was
Still
like, I don't know.
900. This is still anybody's game when you have the final factal as well. So Easily, you're still in control. 400.
400.
All right, here we go. Close your eyes. Although I am not playable in battle, I can be issued commands. I am 37 years old at my first appearance in Final Fantasy. I have a tattoo on my head. It means love. At 39 years old, I started up a tourism business. Oh, I don't know why this is cracking me up. I'll
Tourism.
give you guys another
business.
5 seconds, but time is up. All right. Sorry, you guys. Open your eyes. Shoop, I think you're going to be very disappointed in yourself here. It's Sid.
You can be
Yeah.
ship. Oh my god!
Yep.
I'm never playing Final Fantasy ever again. I'm not allowed.
All I had was a Naruto character who has a tattoo that says love on his forehead.
Oh, that was the one that really got me like off. Like I was like, who has a face tattoo that you can't control?
Dude, I almost said Gladio, and I'm like, ain't no way that man has. I
Well,
was like, maybe it's.
I almost went with Sid from 15, right?
Mm.
Or not Sid, Core from 15. Because he is about 35 when you first meet him, I guess. But anyway.
That was fun. All right.
So
Here we
I
go. Last
honestly
one,
thought
you guys.
Sid was older.
Yeah, I think everybody
Yeah.
does. It's that classic, old man syndrome in Final Fantasy. They look like they're 50 when they're 35. All right,
Yep.
here we go. Final one. Close your eyes, you guys. I am a temporary party member. I have unusual scars all over my body. My name is one of the default options you can choose for the Thief class in remakes of the original Final Fantasy. My best friend often calls me bro.
Can you read them again?
I am a temporary party member. I have unusual scars all over my body. My name is one of the default options you can choose for the Thief class and remakes of the original Final Fantasy. My best friend often calls me bro.
I don't care. I'm going to
Shoot.
guess anyway. This is probably so wrong. Marcus
You're so close.
blank.
It's blank. I can't give it to you. I'm sorry. Oh, Shoop's in the negative. This is not a good night for Shoop. This is not a good night for Shoop.
Time to say goodbye.
Unfortunately, there's no way for you to win, Shoop, but I am going to give you 200 gil to have some fun with. All right? As long as Noct and Easley are not incredibly unintelligent with their gil, they can never lose.
Noctis, we got to put our guild together.
Because we still do have the final factal. All right.
I didn't realize you meant literally like the space is blank to name somebody in the thief
Yeah.
class.
That was clever. Clever.
Yeah. I was like, but there's Marcus? Default name Marcus.
All right, here we go. Final factal category is enemy
I'm gonna
names.
look at chat for one thing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm gonna ask chat: do I all or nothing, or do I just win?
Oh, we gambling now.
Yeah,
All or nothing, you coward.
technically
I'm leaving
Easley
this to
can win
chat.
no matter what. He doesn't need to do anything, and he can win. This is true.
I can literally just bet 100 and then put any answer. Just
I
win.
mean, you don't
Myth
even have to bet
says.
100. You just bet 0.
If I bet all or nothing, I'm running out of here with
If it all,
400 gil
all,
if I win.
Here's one thing I will say, and I feel like I probably shouldn't say this, but what I will say is this is a very simple question, but is not an easy question. You have to get it exactly right.
Like spelling counts exactly
Yes,
right?
Spelling counts.
Quetzalcoatl.
All right. Just wanted to put that out
All right.
there. All right.
It's been spelled differently in every game it's ever been in.
Right. But the one that
I've-
we're thinking about.
I've done my bet, and that's it.
I've put in my wager as well.
Oh, I have not. I have now.
Okay.
Enemy names.
Here we go. There is a robotic spider that chases you out of Dale near the start of Final Fantasy VIII. This sequence of letters and numbers is its name.
Drew, I want a divorce.
You can't be serious right now.
I warned you. I warned you.
It's so easy, but not simple.
I
No,
said it's
simple,
not
but
easy.
Simple, but
it's
not
simple,
easy.
but not easy.
Who can get it the closest is the real question.
I'm curious if anybody in chat can get it. Catport's close, but that's not right. There we go. Main stun, Taser got it right in chat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you guys. I had to be mean at the end here. I had to be a little bit mean at the end. But I did warn you. Noctis actually has a chance to win now.
But I don't.
Way to go, you guys. Way to go in chat. Lots of smart Final Fantasy community members we got here. Got 7 seconds.
For God's sakes. I don't have enough numbers and letters in mine. I know that. All right, I'm allowed to look at
I'm
chat
curious
now,
to see how
right?
close
Now
you
that I've
guys get.
submitted my answer.
Easily, we need you to submit. He's looking it up on his phone.
I'm looking at chat now since I've submitted my answer.
No,
and
my
yeah.
phone
Where's
is
the
over
chat?
there.
Where's the chat?
Mine was way off.
I think.
Are
I'm
you going to
slightly
submit
wrong
easily,
now.
or yes, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm slightly wrong now.
All right. Professor Noctis says Arden is the best villain in the franchise, not this fake spider. I can't disagree that he's a fantastic villain, just underutilized. That is not correct. Shoop says, why S2K0? I would rather go back to the Alped bullshit category with a Final Fantasy X episode. That wasn't even close, honestly. Not even close. I was expecting better than
There's
that.
something
I
that
know
you
I'm
fight
close.
that's like
I know I'm close.
it's similar to Y2K or something crazy.
Easily says
I
X8
know I'm close.
MT0921. You were very close. You had one too many digits and you mixed up the T and the M. It is XATM092.
I
Damn.
knew I was
Okay.
close. I knew I was close.
Easily should get like complimentary points for at least getting the letters and digits wrong.
XATM 092. The winner is
Wow.
Noctis
Whoa!
wins.
What?
Because
Beautiful.
you bet one. You're
Because I
smart.
bet one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All or nothing. Easily went all or nothing. I'm
Right.
sorry,
Yeah, I
Easily.
asked chat. I said all or nothing.
All or nothing. Sometimes that
Hey,
doesn't work
listen.
in your favor. Professor Noctis, our special guest, you have won Final Fantasy Jeopardy.
Woo! Snaps.
Thank you.
Way to go. Fantastic, you guys. That was great. That was really cool.
That was a lot of fun. That was great.
Yeah, that was
And you were so nervous. Look at you now.
you were so nervous.
Hey, listen, not a single question about Final Fantasy 15, but I learned a lot about 9 and 5.
I thought I had 15 in there. I
You
apologize.
did not, and that's why I was like, "Excuse you, where's
You know
the 15
what? I did think I
content?"
had 15 in there. I must have considered a 15 question, but I must have removed it. I apologize.
I made it my
apologize.
final answer. Never steers me wrong.
I mean, it worked out. You got it. It worked. All right, you guys. We have one more. We have one more segment in the show tonight. We got to bring in our buddy. Drew. Get out here. It's time for the Moogle mailbox, you guys. Look at him with his little hat on. Ain't he just adorable, you guys?
No, precious.
All right, we got 6 letters in the Moogle mailbox tonight. Thank you. You guys can still add a few if you want, but we're a little over time limit tonight anyway, so we might not get to all of them. Apologies for that. All right. First up, let's see what our first question is. Do you like Koopo nuts?
Not as much as Torgal.
Yeah. You guys nose bury.
You're gonna bury your nose in
We all
them?
love Koopo nuts, right?
The answer is yes, and then it should be response. I like you, Cooper.
I like you, Koopo. All right. Thank you, Rabo, for the question. Next up, we have Sarcano. So nowadays...
What happened to Drew's experience?
Oh my god.
Sorry.
Wait, what?
What did happen to my experience?
Did you just
happening?
break your experience?
When did that happen?
What just
Just
happened?
now happened. Just now happened.
I pressed a
Drew,
Drew,
button.
what did you do?
I'm scared.
Drew's cheating.
I'm scared, you guys. I'm scared. Before we head out, I'll have to modify my my experience.
Drew's been
You got
grinding that Don
600
Tonder in
experience,
Final
and
Fantasy
it
X.
gave you so much.
What happened? Hold on. Let me see if I can individually reset my experience.
What was he at before? Were you at like 1800 or
All right,
1900?
I'm just gonna reset.
No,
me.
it was at like 900.
All right, I
You should be
reset
on something
myself.
like
If
1500.
I don't get any experience at all, that's fine. I'm
No,
not.
I think you're on 1500, something like that.
All right, if I can manually do it myself, I'll do it. But I obviously don't want to destroy our RPG system. All right. Zarkano asked. So nowadays, Final Fantasy style games have saturated the market. Heck, you could reckon that The Witcher and it could reskin The Witcher and it could seem like a Final Fantasy game. Is there any kind of icon, mythos, or identifier in a Final Fantasy game that definitely makes it seem like a Final Fantasy game outside of just the title? Sid, Moogle, Chocobo. Good question.
Camaraderie, togetherness, friendship.
What
think-
defines Final Fantasy?
So let me ask. I'll ask this to all three of you then, because it attaches to this. If you're playing any Final Fantasy, name 2 things that stand out above anything else. Just 2 things in any Final Fantasy that you'll go, "This is what I'm like."
God, in all honesty, it might really be as simple as like the monster types and like the creatures, like the Moogles and the Chocobos, like those things that are consistent throughout the franchise, because I'm okay with them changing things up entirely. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the essence of what Final Fantasy is. So I would say, you know, it always needs to be an RPG. I will say that always has to have stats and levels to a certain extent. Like if it went literally full on action to the point where it didn't have any of those RPG elements, then I think that would probably hurt it for me as well. But Yeah, Final Fantasy is really whatever it wants to be, in my opinion.
I believe that a Final Fantasy game tells a story usually in a fairly specific way. Most
Mm,
Final Fantasies, they have a feel to the way they tell their stories,
okay.
which is somewhat similar. Even if they're completely different games, I feel like I'm playing one of those games. And the music, even though it's obviously different in each game, the music has just it's Final Fantasy music. I can't describe it in any other way. Anyone that
Mm.
listens to Final Fantasy music, they listen to Final Fantasy music. It's not like they listen to JRPG music in general. You know what I'm
Right.
trying to say?
Okay.
Yeah, my
So
answer is
not
very
to say
simple,
a
and
thought.
it's two things, and it's music and story. Like there's something bonding between the player and the game, usually between those two things, between the music and the story. And I think being able to balance the two at the same time. Like there are loads of moments in Final Fantasy that I feel like excuse me, they put the music at certain parts of the story that you connect with really well and you remember that.
So, What is Final Fantasy was the first video on YouTube I ever made. It's about 15 minutes long, and it is my thesis for what this is. But the long and short of it is, if you ask for two things, the first one I would say is something the developers strive for, and that would be technological immersion. In their storytelling, that's number one, and that's going to encompass cutting edge graphics. That's why, to a prior conversation, they're not going to go retro for 17. It breaks the code of this immersive, groundbreaking experience. The second thing, though, I think is more pertinent. Every Final Fantasy, and this is my thesis, right? Um, every Final Fantasy is about breaking some kind of cycle. It begins in Final Fantasy 1, where you're breaking a constant time loop. And then in Final Fantasy 2, it's the breaking of imperial oppression. Final Fantasy 3 is the end of darkness's grip, which has always been the case. You get it in Final Fantasy 7, where it's the resumption of the cycle of the planet, and breaking the thing that's breaking the cycle. So it riffs on it. Final Fantasy 15 is breaking the cycle of flawed legacies of kingship. Final Fantasy 16 is breaking the cycle of the crystals. Each one of these
Mm.
is about, and that's why in the very first Final Fantasy they start this by it's been this ongoing story that repeats over and over and over again until you play. And this is where it gets really cheesy. The time you play it is the final fantasy. Okay. That's why this name is so amazing, because everything up to this point has been this ongoing cycle, but when you do it, you bring finality to
Nice.
I need to watch that video. I like it.
All right. Next question. Again from Zarkano. Hypothetical. Square Enix announces that they are done with Final Fantasy series as a brand. Are you upset? Relieved? Hopeful for Square Enix's future? Oh my god, I'd be very depressed.
I would
Without a
probably
doubt.
cry.
I would be devastated, honestly. That's simple as that. Yeah.
I am someone that feels that they need to do away with the number system as a general,
Okay.
because that is what off puts so many new people off. So if you were to be done with the Final Fantasy series, I would say get rid of the number at the end and give them a name each, so that you're not feeling like you're playing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're playing Mythic, you're playing Adventure, you're playing, you know, more likely to pick it up as a new player.
Okay. Noctis, what about you?
I really like that idea of just kind of being able to create games without tying it to this storied franchise. Now, I love this franchise, right?
Mm.
But I know from a dollars and cents sort of mindset, it's hard to jump into the 17th iteration. So I think I would be hopeful.
You be hopeful.
You know,
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess I would just kind of question like why? What would
yeah.
be the reasoning for ending Final Fantasy at this point?
Or to say, let me add to this, simply calling it Final Fantasy something, like a Final Fantasy colon whatever it is, you know? Um, I do think that the numbering convention really works against it, like Ease said.
Right.
Yeah, now that it's getting into like, I think it
Yeah.
just sounds weird to say something like Final Fantasy 22.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. We have from 8-Bit Sean, who says Cloud versus Noctis versus Clive triple threat match, all at their prime. Who wins? I mean, I probably got to give it to Clive. I don't know. They're all Noctis is pretty damn strong too. This is a tough one. I don't know actually. I'm already
Cloud's
bouncing
out
back
the
and forth.
window on that one. No,
Yeah, I think
Cloud's
Cloud
gone
probably
out of
is
that
out the
one.
window. I don't think Cloud is
Oh,
beating
yeah,
either
Cloud's
Noctis or Clive on this one.
Honestly, it's a toss up between Noctis and Clive.
Yeah.
They both have incredibly strong powers. Clive essentially, without going too heavy spoilers, look at what he essentially is at the end.
Does Noctis have his Magitech gear though that like basically keeps him invincible?
At their
Oh,
prime.
see,
They're at their
that's
prime.
a
Yeah.
Like-
Oh, see, this is where you go down the rabbit hole, man.
I actually
good.
had this question earlier today. Exact same question. I don't know why I had the exact same question earlier, and the comment, every comment I saw was very split between Noctis and Clive. Very split, and more people leaning towards
Yeah.
Noctis.
Yeah, I tend to lean toward Noctis personally, unshockingly.
No, really?
What a shocker.
No.
I
Well,
think
one
it's
thing that I
fair.
would say is that not Cloud, Noctis relies on his friends more than Clive does. And that
True.
may be his edge beyond being a messianic, godlike king.
That's fair. Okay, next question. We have coming in from Taser Phase. What do you think the most underrated Final Fantasy game is? It's no secret I've been enjoying 12 a lot lately, and I feel that 8, I think it says 8, gets way too much hate. Most underrated Final Fantasy. What do you guys think?
I don't like the term underrated or overrated personally. Like I don't really use those terms much myself, but if we're going that route, I would say, and we talked about this on commercial break when Noctis was talking to me about and telling me about like 2 Final Fantasies that are in my top 3 are at like his bottom.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, you know what I was impressed with though, is that Noctis didn't say that his least favorite was Final Fantasy 2. Because I really liked 2. And I think 2, if you want to use one word underrated, as far as like I understand like the original 2 was probably not that respective of someone's time. The Pixel remaster of 2 is a blast. And if you want to play through it quickly, go just turn off encounters and go run around and have some fun. Like it's a really goofy leveling system, but I like there's a whole thing on my channel now about like shoot speak beaver whenever I figure something out in a game. Like I loved 2. I really loved 2. And I think it gets a lot more hate than even 8 does. I don't think 8 gets nearly as much hate as 2.
Yeah.
I would say because underrated is a very poor terminology, but definitely underplayed and underappreciated. Tactics, phenomenal game, which is so heavily slept on by so many people because on how old it is. I think 8 is very heavily put down, but a lot less in recent years than it once was. I think 13 is very heavily pushed down. I think it deserves a lot more credit than it gets. And lastly, for me on that one, I would probably say 12 because I feel that, and I will shout this to the heavens. So many of more modern Final Fantasies take so much from Final Fantasy 12 that most people don't even realize, and they do take a lot from 12.
Next up.
I wanted to also throw in that 10-2 is not just a girly pop game. Incredible job system. I love it.
Akume Tenchi. What's everyone's best guess, most wanted title for 7? Oh, best guess is like what the title will be for 7 Part 3. One you think it's going to be and one that you think it should be.
I made a really bad joke the other day when we were all talking about this on Drew's stream about like Final Fantasy Return, Final Fantasy Reunion, Final Fantasy, and I was like, how many people are going to be like, nah, it's Final Fantasy Refund? Like, that's how the internet works.
I hate
That
it.
is.
I hate it.
I
I
hate
do
it.
think Return is definitely a possibility, going off of what they did with Remake and Rebirth being in one of the final song titles, Return to the Planet being one of the final
Somebody
songs.
Yeah.
followed me.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know that I care that much. I would have probably liked Reunion if they didn't use it on Crisis Core.
No.
But I'm cool with
Re-
Return. I think Return is cool. Returns is cool. Yeah, I don't know. What about you guys?
Redacted.
Redacted.
Redacted? Oh my gosh.
I like Requiem as an option. I see that in chat. I see
Mhm.
Revenge
Yeah.
in chat. I do feel like it has to be a double syllable word.
I think it needs to be re something. I don't think Retribution, Requiem, like
Reclaim
No.
is
that
also in
Reclaim,
chat.
I think
I
is a
like
possibility.
Reclaim
Yep.
personally. I
Reclaim.
think it'll be Return, but I like Reclaim.
I agree. I like
I
Reclaim as
think
well.
Return is also too basic, which is also said in chat right now. But I feel like it has to be
Mhm.
2 syllables. I don't think it's going to be reclamation, for example.
Right. Or
Mm-mm.
really anything. It's got to be re something.
Yeah.
You know, reunion is technically multiple syllables, but that would have been fine. Like reunion, remake, rebirth. It has to be something like that.
Could be Restore, you know?
Yeah, Restore.
because
Restore would be cool.
I think it
Restoring
could be.
timelines. Yeah.
But it makes sense
th-
too. Just,
Mhm.
They haven't actually stated that it'll be 2 syllables either.
No.
No.
So it
No.
very much could be resurgence, restoring. It could be something to do with the timelines in themselves.
Reminisce.
Could be.
We get a whole
The
prequel for
reunion.
Or it could just be very blunt and say revenge. Revenge against Sephiroth, which is very unlikely, but
Lunchbox in chat said Final Fantasy VII.
Just to see if it
Re-
works, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to try and give myself 100 experience points. I think it's completely broken, but okay, it technically worked. It added up to 1600. All right. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to.
That's where
that'll be
you were.
fine. I think you were
No,
on about
I
15,
I
so
set
that
everything in the
works.
background to be 1500, which is what you told me. So the 100 added on to 1500. I don't know.
Yeah, leave it.
I think it's broken. I think I got to work on this post stream. So I took a picture of our current stats and all that so that I can fix it post stream, but it might not work. Next up,
I'm gonna find out.
Picky Prime says, so I guess my question would be, out of 16 and 7 Rebirth, which do you think had some of the most best emotional moments? Obviously without spoiling anything, but I had some of the most impactful moments in games for me in both games. I have cried more to 7 Rebirth than I've cried to any other game I've ever played. I cried probably 7 times, and like 3 or 4 of those were like sobbing cries. Like I wasn't just teary-eyed, like I was like sobbing on stream during like 4 moments in 7 Rebirth. That's never happened to me before. I didn't really even tear up during 16, I'm not gonna lie.
Drew and I have been together for
Wow.
2 years. I have never seen I've seen this man tear up.
I got like
I've never seen this man cry.
I
like
was very
this.
saddened by the opening, for example, of 16 and a few moments, but it never even got me teary-eyed.
I'm
Wow.
mostly quite reserved with my emotions. Aside from anger, everyone knows I swear a lot. Aside from that, there's very little that upsets me in terms of gaming. And I sat there for a good near 10 minutes during part of Rebirth and barely said a word, trying not to cry.
The trials.
Yeah, I definitely needed to take a moment a few times. During the final battle, when the musical theme kicks in, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, I literally couldn't play the game. I was just like mashing buttons, like not actually paying attention. And then I realized like I'm not playing the game right now. Like I can't even focus. So I hit the touchpad and went into like the menu and like took a moment because I couldn't even play.
There's a video of Drew's final battle on YouTube. It's yeah.
I think
I don't know. Go ahead.
about in the early hours of 16 when Clive has to come back to when he has to come to terms with
Yeah, very
his
powerful moment.
past, that moment, right? Accept the
L3 plus
truth.
R3.
Yeah, L3 R3.
Mm.
That one kind of hit me right in the gut. And I think that it's because my first Final Fantasy was 4. It was so reminiscent of Cecil moving from Dark Knight to Paladin that it conjured up some second grade memories of me with my dad in a way that I was like, this is some powerful, powerful stuff. And so that and seeing Clive's arc throughout. That one got me really emotional. And then the first time that Clive was called Muthos, I
Mm.
lost my mind. I like that was an ecstatic nerd nerd out moment for me,
Nice.
because I knew what they were doing at that point, with Muthos and Logos and all that stuff. But that's just from classic Greek sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is what I want. Rebirth hit me in a lot of different ways, but 16 was pretty meaningful.
Nice.
There was a scene in 16 that really hit me that I was
Mm.
outside of obviously the demo area that happened. I'm gonna try and word this so it doesn't spoil anything. It happened in the Crystalline Dominion to a character
Mm.
who's not really a main character until after the Crystalline Dominion.
Mhm.
And my favorite character of the game, mind you, that was
Same.
my boy. Yeah. And oh god, it just broke me because I felt for him so
Yep.
bad. Like I could, every time there was a scene with him and his family, I was just like, this
Oh
poor
yeah,
dude. Like I love what they did with his character, by the way,
me
especially
too.
just like based on his sexuality as well, that they didn't revolve his character around his sexuality. It was just part of who he was. I
Thank you.
loved
Yeah.
that. Yeah, they did that so well. It's something I wanted to mention earlier when we talked about what 16 did right. That was a big one for me.
I'm gonna skip a
It was
couple
beautiful.
questions that I feel like are a little spoiler heavy, hard
Yeah,
to discuss, and
please.
skip to the final question. I hope I pressed the buttons
But yeah,
right.
that part
Let's see if it
messed me up.
worked. Nope, it did not work. Next question. Hold on.
Yeah, we're not gonna answer any spoiler questions, sorry y'all. But then 7 Rebirth, same for Drew and Easley, the trials, but then also that Barrett scene, which we
I'll
talked
just have
about
to
the
read
tonal
this one. I
shift.
pressed the button too many times.
Oh.
The question is, we'll end on this, you guys. What are your thoughts on the long rumored 9 remake? If it is real, what would you want them to add, change, keep for sure, etc.? Noctis wants them to change everything. He hates 9.
It's not that I hate 9, but I do want them to tweak the battle system. Just make it faster.
Yeah,
It's slow. It's
agreed.
really slow.
I want them to expand on the side characters. Give the characters the remake treatment because look at what they could do with Tantalus. Look at what they could do with Freya. Look at what they could do with Amaranth.
Mm.
These characters that have such little backstory that
Mm,
you have to hunt for in some cases.
yeah.
Just give them that.
Okay, Shoop.
There's on the back of the Final Fantasy IX game case, there's an image of Amaranth depicted in a full motion video with like an explosion behind him. And then it's never in the game. So I'd really like to know where that came from, first of all. But also, like, all of Amaranth's side story is optional. It's in ATEs that, like, most of you miss anyway. And then Freya, her story just kind of, like, fallen off at the end of, like, not even at the end of disc 2, but, like, halfway through disc 2 is kind of like, she's your Dragoon. Well, they don't say Dragoon. They say Dragon Knight in 9. But it's like, Dragoons are iconic. You can give her a little bit more than like, no, her poor city has fallen, and now, I guess she's best friends with like the genocidal warrior that killed all her people.
Need a little bit more there.
I know which image you mean because it's on the back of the walkthrough guide as well, but it's not on the back of my 9 case.
It's not on the back of the international version,
This one.
right?
Huh.
That's on the back of mine.
You have the Aoife tree on the back.
Wow,
And
the
to
tree.
add one more
Yep.
to everything you guys said, I agree with everything so far. But also, I would love for them to take the final boss of the game.
Give it meaning.
Give it some foreshadowing throughout the game. Give it some more meaning. I'd like what it represents in the game, and I don't want them to remove it. Actually, I actually really like what the final boss represents. I just think that they need to plant seed, right? They need to plant seeds throughout the game, give it meaning, have it show up in some, conversations here and there, maybe even some side questy type stuff to give it some foreshadowing, so that when it does show up, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now,
Make Beatrix playable and add whispers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You
Shoop would
can.
lose her
Oh, hey,
mind in a
Noctis,
bad
you're
way.
talking about playing possibly the Maguri mod.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
There
The
is
Ultimate Fantasy mod.
Yeah, the alternate fantasy mod actually lets you play as Beatrix, and like after a certain point in the
That's what I mean.
story, and it also changes some things too to make it make sense that she's in your party for the rest
Oh,
of the
I
game.
want that. Okay.
That's
my
cool.
dream mod.
My dream is to get you to like Final Fantasy IX more.
Mod space is
so.
very cool. Guys,
Better chance than 5.
we're going to wrap things up there. 4-hour episode, but man, lots of really good conversation tonight. Really, I loved everything we dove into, and Noctis, you were a fantastic guest. It was great having your experience, and it's clear that you're a professor. Very clear.
You're very eloquent. I like it.
Yeah, you brought a lot of great conversation to the show tonight, and we appreciate you
And
coming
unlike
on.
my students, you stayed awake. So
Nice. Guys, give Prof Noctis a follow on Twitch. Give them a sub on YouTube. They're fantastic. They're providing video essays and thesis videos and all that in the Final Fantasy space, and really, really great content. And of course, you guys know Easily and Shoot, but if you haven't followed them yet, please give them the follow. And hey, why not give me the follow too? If you maybe if you
At least
if
give
you'd
him the
like,
experience.
maybe give me a follow. That'd be kind of cool too, if you want. We will be back next month, you guys. I'd really like to get back into the habit of doing the first Thursday of each month, so that's probably what we're going to shoot for in July. But we'll keep you guys updated on the Discord, discord.gg/Droogle. We have an entire Crystal Bearers category where we'll keep you guys updated. You can talk Final Fantasy in the meantime, talk about anything and everything Final Fantasy on the Discord while we wait for the next episode. If we ever do a 15-1 Noctis, we know who to call. You're coming on again, right? Please, for 15.
I would love it. That would be so fun.
We've done a 10 episode. We haven't done a 15 one yet.
No, we have not.
And
Come on.
the ending for me to you, Not, if you want to see what is a quick Final Fantasy IX battle system, just check any of the speedrunners. I promise you, it's not
Noted.
slow.
Nothing can fix the intro to battle, though.
It's slow. It's
That
very
is
slow.
a
Unless you
very
get a
slow
mod.
loader.
You can remove
Unless
it.
The
you get a
mods remove it.
You can
yeah.
remove it.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mods
You
remove
also
it. Yeah.
you can also just do the short battle. You skip battle intro. It's slow still, but not
Can you
as
really?
slow.
You can do that on
Yeah.
console. You can
Yeah.
skip battle
The
intro on console.
PS4 remaster has that. Yeah. So there
It's
are
on
some
Steam
quality
and
of life improvements that
remasters.
they've added, because I do think they
Okay.
recognized how slow it was. But yeah, that's a very common complaint, is how slow the lead into battles is and all that kind of
It's
stuff.
just that lead in. It's like dun, 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 dun. It's good. but-
It's a good song. Yeah, it's a good song at least.
Yeah, the whole deal.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining tonight. It was a pleasure having you all in chat. Apologies that we couldn't answer every single question, and of course, with a talk show, it's hard to acknowledge the chat at every turn. But please get on the Discord, join us in our Twitch streams, and we can keep talking Final Fantasy with you all. We'll find out who we're gonna raid tonight once we head into our credits sequence. So don't go anywhere. We're gonna find somebody and hit that raid button to send all this love forward, probably to another Final Fantasy streamer. But that is it for us tonight as the Crystal Bearers. Thank you so much again. Until next time, take care. And as always, don't forget to level up, everybody. Bye.